Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Boring History for Sleep. Tonight, we begin with a question that should make you very grateful for your modern comforts. What was it actually like to visit a doctor in the 1700s? He might also examine a sample of your urine, not for chemical analysis, but to check its color, smell, and even taste. This is all part of a diagnostic process that feels more like fortune-telling than medicine. The story of the fork and the story of Hedy Lamarr have a curious parallel. Both were initially rejected by the establishment. The fork was rejected by the clergy as sinful, and Hedy's invention was rejected by the Navy as impractical. Both rejections were based on prejudice and a resistance to the unfamiliar. The fork was a strange foreign object, and Hedy was an unqualified woman. In both cases, the inherent value of the idea eventually won out over the initial prejudice. It's a quiet reminder that good ideas have a resilience of their own and can often outlast the biases of the era in which they were born. The financial aspect of the Great Emu War is a crucial part of its absurdity. The government agreed to fund the military's involvement, but the cost of the soldiers' pay and, more importantly, the vast quantities of ammunition was to be borne by the local farmers. The military was essentially a contractor. This arrangement quickly proved untenable. The cost of firing thousands of bullets to kill a handful of birds, which had a bounty value of only a few shillings each, was economically disastrous. The war ended not just because it was ineffective, but because it was a terrible business proposition, a conflict where the cost of each casualty was astronomically high. Let's delve deeper into the physical experience of the early cut and cover tube lines. The ventilation was notoriously poor. To try and improve the air quality, large sections of the tunnel were left open to the sky in cuttings. This meant that on a rainy day, water would pour onto the tracks and into the carriages. The combination of steam, smoke, soot, and damp created a uniquely unpleasant atmosphere. It's a testament to the sheer horror of London's street-level traffic that thousands of people willingly chose to subject themselves to this subterranean ordeal every day. It was simply the lesser of two evils. The development of the deep-level tube created a new kind of urban geography. London now had two layers, the familiar city at ground level and a new, invisible city deep below. This created a new way of thinking about distance. A journey that was long and complicated on the surface could be a short, direct line on the tube map. The city was mentally rewired. Neighborhoods that were once considered distant were now close, because they were on the same tube line. The underground didn't just move people. It reshaped their entire perception of the city's space and their place within it. Let's consider the social life of the tube shelters during the Blitz. These were not silent, fearful places. They were vibrant, noisy communities. People organized sing-alongs, played cards, and shared news and rumors. Children played on the platforms, and makeshift libraries were set up by volunteers. It was an extraordinary example of social cohesion under pressure. Strangers from all walks of life were thrown together in the intimate, crowded space of the platforms, forging a unique shelter spirit of solidarity and mutual support. For many, it was a lonely time. But in the tube, they were not alone. It's worth reflecting on the other inventions Hedy Lamarr worked on. The effervescent drink tablet, for example, was a commercial failure because she said it tasted like Alka-Seltzer. But the idea itself was sound, a precursor to modern drink mixes. Her suggestion to Howard Hughes about aircraft wing design showed a sophisticated, intuitive grasp of aerodynamics. These smaller, less famous examples are important because they show that her frequency-hopping invention was not a fluke. It was the product of a consistently inventive and curious mind. A mind that was always working, always questioning, always trying to figure out a better way to do things. The legacy of George Antheil, Hedy's collaborator, is also fascinating. After his brief foray into military technology, he went on to have a successful career as a more conventional composer of film scores in Hollywood. His life was just as strange and varied as Hedy's. The patent he co-authored remained an obscure footnote in his biography for decades. The story of the secret communication system is a testament to the strange and unpredictable paths that creativity can take, and the unexpected ways that different worlds, in this case, avant-garde music and wartime technology, can collide and create something entirely new and revolutionary. The final victory of the fork can be seen as the victory of a certain kind of domestic order. The elaborate table settings of the Victorian era, with their ranks of specialized forks, were part of a larger culture of domestic ritual. Dining became a performance, with strict rules of etiquette. The fork was a key prop in this performance. Mastering its use was part of the education of any middle or upper-class person. It was a small but significant part of the civilizing process, the taming of our more animal instincts in favor of a more controlled and orderly way of being. Thinking about the materials of history is a soothing exercise. Imagine the feel of the things we've discussed. The heavy, oily steel of the Lewis machine gun. The cool, smooth brickwork of a London underground tunnel. The glossy, heavy paper of Heidi Lamar's patent application. The cold, weighty silver of a Victorian fish fork. Each object tells a story, not just through its history, but through its physical presence. These tangible connections to the past are all around us, in the museums we visit, the buildings we walk through, and even the simple objects we use every day. They are quiet anchors to the long, deep stream of time. The Emu War has a particular resonance in Australia, a country where the relationship with the unique and often challenging native fauna is a core part of the national identity. The story taps into a broader narrative of humans trying, and often failing, to tame the wild and unpredictable Australian continent. It's a story told with a wry, self-deprecating humor that is characteristic of the Australian psyche. It's a reminder that in the vast, ancient landscape of Australia, humans are often just another species, and not always the one in charge. The emus, in their own way, were defending their territory, and for a brief, glorious moment they won. His entire worldview is based on the ancient theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A healthy person has these four fluids in perfect balance. Your illness, he concludes, is an imbalance. The evolution of the tube map after Harry Beck is also a story in itself. Over the decades, new lines have been added, names have changed, and the design has been subtly tweaked. But the core principles of Beck's schematic diagram have remained. It has been adapted and expanded, but never truly replaced. This shows the power of a truly great design idea. It was not a rigid, fixed solution, but a flexible and adaptable system that could grow and change with the city it represented. The map is a living document, a visual history of London's growth, all built on the foundation of one man's brilliant, clarifying insight. Heidi Lamar's story has become a powerful source of inspiration, particularly for women in science and technology. She is a potent symbol of the fight against being stereotyped and underestimated. Her life serves as a reminder that a person can be many things at once: beautiful and brilliant, an artist and a scientist. The rediscovery of her inventive genius has provided a new kind of role model, one who broke the mold and defied the narrow expectations of her time. Her story encourages us to look beyond the surface, both in others and in ourselves, and to value the hidden talents that often lie dormant, waiting for their moment. The global spread of the fork is a small but perfect example of cultural diffusion. An idea or an object starts in one place, in this case the Byzantine Empire, and slowly spreads along trade routes and through cultural exchange. It is adapted and modified as it moves, with the French adding more tines to the Italian design. It meets resistance in some cultures and is eagerly adopted in others. Its journey across the map, over centuries, is a miniature history of globalization, a quiet story of how our interconnected world was built, one shared idea and one shared utensil at a time. There is a strange poetry in the silence of the failed Emu War. After the noisy, frantic bursts of machine gun fire, and quietness would have descended on the Australian plains. The only sounds would be the wind in the scrubland and the distant, triumphant calls of the scattered emus regrouping. It is the silence of failure, the quiet acknowledgement that human technology and military doctrine had been defeated by something more ancient and unpredictable. It's a humbling kind of quiet, a sound that speaks of the limits of our power and the enduring strength of the natural world. The escalators of the London Underground have their own history. The first one was installed at Earl's Court Station in 1911. To reassure a nervous public, a man with a wooden leg named Bumper Harris was hired to ride up and down all day, demonstrating its safety. The unwritten rule of London etiquette, stand on the right, walk on the left, is a fascinating example of spontaneous social ordering. It's a simple, efficient system that emerged organically without any official decree. It's a small, daily ballet of civic cooperation, a testament to the way people create their own rules to make shared spaces work more smoothly. Imagine Hedy Lamarr in her Hollywood home in the evenings, after a long day of playing a glamorous but simple character on a film set. She retreats to her drafting table, the tools of her secret life spread out before her. The sharp pencils, the clean lines of the rulers, the crisp paper. This was her sanctuary, the place where she could be her true self. The contrast between her two worlds is stark: the bright, artificial world of the movie studio and the quiet, focused, intellectual world of her private workshop. It was in that quiet space that her real, enduring contribution to the world was made. The very act of sitting down to a meal with a fork is a learned behavior that we take for granted. Watching a small child learn to use a fork is to see the history of its adoption in miniature. First, there is clumsiness and frustration. The food falls off. Stabbing is easier than scooping. But slowly, through observation and practice, the skill is mastered. This simple domestic process is a direct link to those Venetian courtiers and French aristocrats. We are all participating in a cultural tradition that is centuries old, a quiet ritual of civility passed down through generations. One meal at a time. The Great Emu War serves as a perfect historical anecdote. It's short, self-contained, and has a clear, humorous punchline. It's the kind of story that gets passed around because it's so delightfully strange. It requires no deep knowledge of Australian politics or military history to appreciate its absurdity. It stands alone as a testament to the fact that history is not always about grand battles and noble ideologies. Sometimes, it's about the small, weird, and utterly human moments of failure, which are often more memorable and more instructive than the victories. The soundscape of the London Underground is a key part of its identity. The roar of the train entering the station, the high-pitched squeal of the wheels on a tight curve, the automated voice announcing the next stop, the gentle chime of the closing doors. These are sounds that are deeply ingrained in the consciousness of any Londoner. They are the sounds of the city's heartbeat, the rhythmic pulse of its daily life. If you close your eyes on a platform, you can hear the whole story of the tube, a story of movement, of connection, and of a city that never truly sleeps. The patent system itself is a fascinating piece of history. The idea that an inventor can have a temporary monopoly on their idea is a powerful engine of innovation. Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil's patent is a perfect example of the system working as intended, at least on paper. It recorded their idea, established their ownership, and preserved it for posterity. Even though the Navy failed to act on it, the existence of the patent meant that their contribution could not be erased from history. It was a message in a bottle, waiting for future generations to find it and understand its significance. The diagnosis is almost always the same, regardless of the symptoms. You have an excess of one humor and a deficiency in another. The cure, therefore, is simple in principle. The bad stuff must come out. Let's end this part of our journey by thinking about the texture of history. It's not a smooth, linear progression. It's messy, contradictory, and full of strange detours, like a war against birds. It has hidden layers, like the secret inventive life of a movie star. It has deep foundations, like the tunnels beneath a city. And it has small, everyday details, like the fork on our table. All these stories, large and small, weave together to create the rich, complex, and endlessly fascinating tapestry of the past. And as you drift deeper now, let these stories settle, becoming a soft, quiet background to your own peaceful rest. The retreat of Major Meredith's forces from the emu-infested farmlands of Western Australia must have been a peculiar sight. One can imagine the two soldiers, McMurray and O'Halloran, packing up their Lewis guns with a sense of weary disbelief. They had been sent to wage a war and were returning in defeat, not at the hands of a fearsome enemy army, but by a creature from their own country's coat of arms. The long, dusty journey back to Perth would have been a quiet one, filled with the strange knowledge that they were now veterans of one of the most bizarre conflicts in military history. Their official reports would be filed, but the unofficial story, the one told in barracks and pubs for years to come, would be one of feathers and failure. Consider the economic context of the Great Emu War more deeply. The Great Depression had sent the global price of wheat plummeting. The soldier settlers of Western Australia were already on the brink of financial collapse before the first emu ever set foot on their land. The government's promise of a new life after the horrors of World War I had soured. The emu invasion was the final straw, a biological crisis piled on top of an economic one. This context transforms the story from a simple comedy into something more poignant. The farmers' desperation was very real. The war, as funny as it seems in hindsight, was born from a place of genuine hardship and the fear of losing everything. The legacy of the Emu War, in environmental terms, is also worth considering. The conflict and the subsequent bounty system was part of a broader Australian history of viewing native animals as pests to be eradicated in the name of agriculture. It reflects an old-world mindset of conquering nature, rather than coexisting with it. Today, the emu is a protected species, and conservation efforts focus on habitat preservation and managing human-wildlife conflict more peacefully. The war stands as a stark, if humorous, example of a flawed approach to ecology, a lesson learned the hard way about the unintended consequences of trying to impose simple, violent solutions on complex natural systems. Let us now return to the dark, sulphurous tunnels of the early Metropolitan Railway in London. The class system of Victorian England was, of course, built into the very carriages of the trains. There were first, second, and third-class carriages, each with vastly different levels of comfort. First-class passengers enjoyed upholstered seats and better lighting, while third-class travelers were crammed onto hard wooden benches in dimly lit, smoke-filled cars. The Underground, despite being a modern marvel, replicated the rigid social hierarchy of the world above. It was a democratizing force in that it allowed people of all classes to travel quickly, but it did so by keeping them firmly segregated in their respective social spheres. The engineering marvel of the Greathead Shield, which made the deep-level tubes possible, is a story of quiet genius. James Henry Greathead, a South African engineer, perfected the design, creating a device that was both a protective shield and a forward propulsion system. As the clay was excavated from the front, powerful hydraulic jacks would push the entire shield forward, and behind it, workers would bolt together segments of a cast-iron ring to form the tunnel lining. It was an ingenious inch-by-inch process of burrowing and building. This technology is the true hero of the tube's expansion, the silent, powerful engine that allowed London's subterranean web to grow and spread far beneath the city's ancient foundations. The corporate rivalry between the early underground companies, particularly the Metropolitan and the District Railways, had a lasting physical impact on the network. For years, the two companies refused to allow their trains to run on each other's tracks, forcing passengers to change trains and walk between adjacent stations. Their squabbles over the completion of the Inner Circle line delayed the project for years. This competitive capitalist free-for-all resulted in a fragmented and often illogical system. It took the unifying force of figures like Charles Yerkes and Frank Pick to wrangle this chaotic collection of private enterprises into the coherent, public-facing service it would eventually become, a process of forced cooperation for the greater good. Let's revisit Heidi Lamar's escape from her first husband, Friedrich Mandel. While the details may be embellished, the core of the story is one of immense bravery. She was a young woman in her early 20s, trapped in a loveless and controlling marriage to a powerful and dangerous man with connections to the rising Nazi regime. Her decision to flee was not just a personal one, it was a political one. She was turning her back on a world of fascist sympathizing power and wealth. Her escape was an act of defiance, a reclaiming of her own agency and moral compass. It was the first and perhaps most dramatic demonstration of the strong, independent spirit that lay beneath her glamorous public persona. The name change from Hedwig Kiesler to Hedy Lamarr is significant. It was a common practice in old Hollywood for studio heads to rename foreign or ethnic-sounding actors to make them more palatable to a mainstream American audience. While it launched her career, it also represented a severing of her ties to her past, to her Austrian Jewish roots. It was part of the process of being molded into a Hollywood product. The name Heidi Lamarr was a brand, a beautiful and exotic mask that obscured the real person, Hedwig Kiesler, the curious girl who liked to take things apart to see how they worked. The invention, in a way, was the revenge of Hedwig Kiesler. Consider the sheer intellectual leap that Hedy Lamarr made. She had no formal training in engineering or communications technology. Her knowledge was pieced together from overheard conversations at dinner parties. Yet, she was able to synthesize this information, identify a key technological problem, radio jamming, and conceptualize a brilliant and original solution. This ability to see the connections between disparate ideas, the vulnerability of torpedoes, and the principles of secure communication is the hallmark of a truly innovative mind. It shows that genius is not always the product of formal education. Sometimes, it is the result of a powerful curiosity and an innate talent for creative problem solving. And the number one way to get the bad stuff out is, of course, bloodletting. The physician opens his bag and withdraws his primary tools. Not a syringe, but a phlegm or a lancet, designed for opening a vein. Let us ponder the fork's role in the development of table manners. With the adoption of the fork, a whole new set of rules emerged. How to hold it, which fork to use for which course, the proper way to cut food using both knife and fork. These became complex social codes. The continental style of keeping the fork in the left hand and the American style of switching the fork to the right hand after cutting are two distinct cultural legacies of this period. The fork didn't just change what we eat with, it changed how we eat, turning the simple act of consumption into a carefully choreographed performance of social grace. The material of early forks is also part of their story. The first forks used by the wealthy were made of precious materials like gold and silver, often studded with gems. This is what made them such a potent symbol of luxury and excess. The slow trickle-down of the fork to the masses was only possible when new materials and manufacturing processes, like the development of stainless steel and silver plating, made them affordable. The fork's journey from a treasure of the elite to a common household item is a story of technological and industrial progress, making a once exclusive object available to all. As we let these stories settle, we can feel a sense of gratitude. Gratitude that our military is not at war with the local wildlife. Gratitude for the quiet efficiency of modern public transport, free of steam and soot. Gratitude for the scientists and engineers, famous or forgotten, whose work created the modern world. And gratitude for the simple, unquestioned civility of our dinner tables. History is not just a collection of facts, it is a source of perspective. It allows us to appreciate the comfort, safety, and quiet wonders of our own time. And with that gentle thought, allow yourself to drift even deeper into a peaceful, restful state. The ornithological perspective on the Great Emu War is one of bemusement. Experts at the time, like the eminent ornithologist Dominic Cervantes, documented the events not as a war, but as an ill-conceived cull. He noted the emus' resilience and nomadic patterns, arguing that the military's approach was bound to fail because it misunderstood the bird's basic biology. The emus weren't a stationary army to be conquered. They were a fluid, migratory population. The story, from a scientific standpoint, is a classic example of human hubris, of trying to apply a rigid, mechanistic solution to a fluid, biological problem. Nature, as the emus proved, doesn't follow military doctrine. Let's imagine the scene in the Australian House of Representatives when the failure of the Emu War was debated. The transcript of the debate reveals a mix of genuine concern for the farmers, political point scoring, and sheer incredulity. One member of Parliament dryly inquired whether a medal would be awarded for the campaign. Another suggested that the emus should be offered the use of the machine guns and allowed to declare war on the farmers. The episode provided endless material for political satire, a moment of levity during the grim years of the Depression, and a rare instance where politicians and the public could unite in their amusement at the government's expense. The legacy of Charles Pearson, the social reformer who first championed the London Underground, is often overshadowed by the engineers and financiers. But his original vision was profoundly humane. He saw the Underground Railway not just as a solution to traffic, but as a tool for social justice. His dream was that it would enable the, quote, slum clearance of the overcrowded city center, allowing working-class families to live in healthier, more spacious suburbs while still being able to commute to their jobs. While the reality was more complex, his idealistic and socially conscious motivation was the moral engine that drove the entire project forward in its earliest, most difficult years. Let's consider the tube's role in the expansion of London. The famous slogan Metroland, coined in the early 20th century, promoted a vision of idyllic suburban life in the countryside of Middlesex, Buckinghamshire, and Hertfordshire, all made possible by the Metropolitan Line. The railway company didn't just build a line, it became a property developer, buying up farmland and building new suburbs around its stations. The tube literally created new communities, shaping the modern geography of Greater London. It was an engine of urban sprawl, pulling the city outwards and transforming sleepy villages into bustling commuter towns, forever changing the landscape and character of the home counties. Hedy Lamarr's relationship with Hollywood was a complex dance of mutual exploitation. The studios used her incredible beauty to sell movie tickets and create a fantasy of European glamour. In return, she received wealth, fame, and a platform that gave her a certain kind of power and independence, especially as a refugee who had arrived with little. She understood the transaction but grew to resent its limitations. She was playing a role both on and off the screen, and the line between the two must have blurred. Her frustration with the system was the price she paid for the security and freedom it offered, a Faustian bargain that defined much of her adult life. The sheer elegance of the frequency-hopping concept is worth savoring. It's a fundamentally simple idea, yet profoundly effective. It's a game of hide-and-seek played at the speed of light. The signal is never in one place long enough to be caught. This principle of making a signal elusive by keeping it in constant coordinated motion is now a cornerstone of secure communications. It's a beautiful example of how a clever idea can be more powerful than brute force. Instead of trying to power through the jamming signal, Hedy's idea was to simply not be where the jamming was. It was a victory of intellect over interference. The slow disappearance of the knife as a primary eating utensil is the other side of the fork story. Before the fork, people carried their own personal knives which they used for everything from cutting their food to cleaning their teeth. As forks became standard, the role of the knife at the table was reduced. It became blunter, less of a personal tool and more of a specialized piece of tableware, used only for cutting. The rise of the fork effectively disarmed the dinner table, contributing to a more genteel, less overtly threatening dining environment. The taming of the knife is as much a part of this story as the rise of the fork. He'll tie a strip of linen tightly around your arm. The veins bulge. He is swift and practiced, and with a quick, sharp motion he makes the incision. There's no anesthetic, of course, just a grim acceptance of the pain. As we settle into a state of deep relaxation, we can see how these stories connect. They are all, in their own way, about the conflict between order and chaos. The Australian Army trying to impose military order on the chaos of nature. The engineers of the underground trying to impose a logical grid on the chaotic geography of a city. Hedy Lamarr trying to create a secret order within the chaos of radio signals. And the proponents of the fork trying to impose a new social order on the chaotic act of eating. History, in many ways, is the story of this ongoing struggle, the endless human attempt to find patterns and create systems in a world that is often beautifully, stubbornly, and wonderfully chaotic. A final, quiet thought on the Great Emu War, the emu's place on the Australian coat of arms. Alongside the kangaroo, the emu was chosen because it is one of the few animals that is perceived to be unable to walk backward easily. This was meant to symbolize a nation always moving forward, a symbol of progress. The irony, of course, is that in 1932, it was this very symbol of national progress that brought the nation's military progress to a grinding, embarrassing halt. It's a perfect, circular piece of historical irony, a detail that makes the story not just funny, but poetically complete. The symbol of forward momentum refused to be cleared out of the way of progress. The Mind the Gap announcement on the London Underground is an icon in itself. It was first recorded in 1968 to warn passengers about the space between the straight platform and the curved train at certain stations. The original voice, a sound engineer named Peter Lodge, became an accidental celebrity. In 2012, the widow of another actor who had recorded a version of the announcement for the Northern Line successfully petitioned Transport for London to restore his voice at Embankment Station so she could hear her late husband's voice every day on her commute. It's a touching story of how this functional impersonal announcement has become a source of personal memory and emotional connection. Let's consider the end of Hedy Lamarr's life and her relationship with her own invention. In her final years, she was known to be a prolific and lengthy telephone user, spending hours a day talking to friends and family. There is a beautiful, if unconfirmed, story that she refused to own a microwave oven, wary of the radiation. The deep irony is that the cordless telephones she likely used, and the mobile phones that would soon become ubiquitous, all relied on the spread spectrum principles she had pioneered. She was living in the world she had helped to create, her voice traveling through the air on the invisible waves that her own mind had helped to secure. The final, universal acceptance of the fork represents the triumph of a collective idea of hygiene. The shift away from using hands was driven by a growing, though not yet scientific, understanding that direct contact could be unclean. The fork created a barrier, a sterile intermediary between the food and the body. This move towards a more sanitary dining experience was part of a much larger 19th century public health movement that included the development of sewer systems and a better understanding of disease transmission. The humble fork, in its own small way, was a foot soldier in the war against germs, a tiny victory for public health on the dinner table. The humor of the Emu War is rooted in the reversal of expectations. We expect a modern, mechanized army to be invincible against animals. The story is funny because it flips this script entirely. It's a David and Goliath story, but where Goliath is a bumbling and ineffective machine, and David is a flock of thousands of fast-running birds. This subversion of the natural order of power is deeply satisfying. It's a reminder that strength comes in many forms, and that the race is not always to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, especially when the strong have brought the wrong tools for the job. The abandoned ticket halls and lift shafts of the London Underground's ghost stations are a playground for urban explorers. These illicit adventurers sneak into the disused parts of the network, documenting a world frozen in time. Their photographs reveal dusty booking offices with faded posters, silent corridors, and platforms that haven't seen a passenger in decades. It's a risky hobby, but it speaks to a deep human desire to connect with the hidden layers of our cities, to peel back the surface of the present, and touch the forgotten bones of the past that lie just out of sight in the quiet darkness between the stations. Hedy Lamarr's story is also a cautionary tale about the nature of fame. She achieved a level of global celebrity that few people will ever experience, yet it brought her very little personal happiness. She was trapped by her own image, a prisoner of the public's perception of her. Her life suggests that fame is not a destination, but a strange and distorting lens that can separate a person from their true self. Her eventual withdrawal from public life was a retreat from that distortion, an attempt to live a life that was smaller, quieter, and perhaps more authentic. The etiquette of the fork versus the spoon for eating dessert is a minor but persistent cultural battleground. In Britain, the traditional tool for most desserts is a spoon, sometimes accompanied by a small fork. In America, the fork is often the primary, and sometimes only, utensil provided for cake. These small differences are fascinating cultural fossils. They are the remnants of different historical paths and social conventions, tiny unspoken signifiers of national identity that play out at the end of a meal. They show how deep the roots of custom can run, even in something as simple as how we eat our dessert. Let's contemplate the landscape of the Emu War. The Western Australian wheat belt is a vast, flat, and often harsh environment. It's a land of wide-open skies and monotonous scrub. In this immense, featureless terrain, the emus were masters of camouflage and distance. The soldiers, accustomed to the landscapes of Europe or the close quarters of trench warfare, would have felt exposed and disoriented. The environment itself was a key player in the conflict, a silent ally to the emus. It was a war fought not just against an animal, but against the sheer scale and indifference of the Australian continent. They'll collect the blood in a small, graduated bowl, measuring just how much of your vital fluid they are draining away. The goal is to remove just enough to rebalance you, but not so much that you faint, ideally. The roundel logo of the London Underground is a perfect piece of design. It's simple, bold, and instantly recognizable. The red circle and blue bar are abstract, yet they have come to represent something very concrete: the entire city of London and the act of travel within it. It works as a sign on a station, a symbol on a map, and a pattern on merchandise. Its genius lies in its versatility and its timeless modernism. Frank Pick commissioned it over a century ago, yet it still looks fresh and contemporary. It is proof that the simplest ideas are often the most powerful and enduring. The final chapter of Hedy Lamarr's life saw a strange intersection of her two legacies. She was involved in several shoplifting scandals in her later years, events that were sadly reported in the press. At the same time, the tech community was beginning to celebrate her as a pioneer of modern communications. It was a bizarre duality. The tabloids were focusing on the sad decline of a former star, while the scientific world was finally recognizing her as a forgotten genius. Her life ended in this strange limbo, caught between the two powerful and ultimately irreconcilable narratives that had defined her. The modern fork, with its 4 curved tines, is a beautiful example of design compromise. It is not the best possible tool for stabbing. A 2-pronged fork is better for that. And it is not the best possible tool for scooping. A spoon is better for that, but it is very good at doing both. It is a generalist, a hybrid tool that evolved to handle the varied demands of a modern meal. Its design is a quiet testament to the power of versatility, a perfect balance of piercing and carrying, a small, elegant compromise that has earned its permanent place on our tables. The silence in the aftermath of the Emu War's first campaign was filled with the sound of political maneuvering. The opposition party in the Australian Parliament seized on the failure as a perfect example of government incompetence. Questions were asked, ridicule was heaped, and the Minister of Defense was forced to defend a decision that had become a national laughingstock. The war was fought not only in the fields with machine guns, but in the chambers of Parliament with words, a secondary conflict of rhetoric and reputation that was, in its own way, just as fierce as the primary one. The distinctive tiled patterns of the London Underground stations are another layer of its design history. Each station on the Victoria line, for example, has its own unique tile motif in the seating recesses, designed by a different artist. These patterns often relate to the history of the station's location. Brixton's motif is a ton of bricks, a pun on the name. This attention to detail turns the daily commute into a subtle treasure hunt, a wayfinding system encoded in art. It's another example of Frank Pick's philosophy of total design, embedding beauty and identity into the most functional of spaces. The fact that Heidi Lamar and George Antheil's patent was granted under her married name at the time, Heidi Kiesler-Markey, helped to obscure her involvement for decades. Researchers looking for Heidi Lamar in the patent records would have found nothing. This small bureaucratic detail acted as a form of camouflage, keeping her brilliant contribution hidden in plain sight. It's a reminder of how easily history can be lost in the details and how the identities of women, so often tied to the names of their husbands, can be submerged in the official record. As you rest now, consider the quiet sounds of your own space, the gentle hum of an appliance, the distant murmur of traffic, the soft rustle of your own breathing. Each of these sounds is part of the story of your own present moment. The stories we've heard tonight are from the past, but they resonate in the quiet of our own lives. They remind us that our world is built on layers of history, of strange conflicts, ingenious inventions, and the slow, steady evolution of the ordinary. Let that thought be a comforting blanket as you drift peacefully and completely into sleep. The Great Emu War has also found a life online, becoming a popular and enduring meme. The story is perfectly suited for the internet age. It's bizarre, easily summarized, and features a clear underdog victory. The narrative of a modern army being defeated by birds is endlessly adaptable for jokes about futile efforts and unexpected failures. This digital afterlife has introduced the story to a whole new generation, ensuring that the memory of Major Meredith's strange campaign will live on, not just in history books, but in the shared, humorous language of internet culture. Let's consider the London Underground's upholstery, the patterned fabric on the seats known as moquette. Frank Pick's design philosophy extended even here. He commissioned artists and designers to create hard-wearing, visually complex patterns. The complexity was intentional. It was designed to hide wear and dirt, but also to discourage vandalism. The patterns have become iconic in their own right, a piece of mobile public art that millions of people interact with every day. Each line has its own distinctive moquette, another subtle part of the network's carefully curated identity. It's design thinking applied to the most mundane of surfaces. The story of Heidi Lamar's patent is a powerful lesson in intellectual property. By offering the patent to the Navy for free during the war, she and Antheil waived any chance of profiting from it. When the technology was eventually developed and commercialized decades later, long after the patent had expired, They received no financial reward for their foundational contribution. Their motivation was purely patriotic. While their generosity is admirable, their story also serves as a stark reminder of the importance of timing and business acumen in the world of invention. They had the genius, but not the financial benefit. If bloodletting isn't the chosen path, then it's purging. The doctor might prescribe a powerful emetic to make you vomit, or a harsh laxative. The goal is the same: a violent expulsion of the body's contents. The evolution of the spork, that hybrid of a spoon and fork, is a modern footnote to the fork's long history. It is a tool born of a desire for ultimate efficiency and minimalism, popular in fast food restaurants and with campers. However, it embodies the problem of compromise. It is not a very good spoon, nor a very good fork. Its existence is a testament to our ongoing quest to refine and simplify our tools, but its limited success also proves the enduring value of specialized instruments. The spork is a quirky and functional novelty, but it has never managed to dethrone its two ancient and more effective parents. The choice to arm the soldiers in the Emu War with Lewis guns, rather than a more suitable weapon like a Vickers machine gun, was a practical one. The Lewis gun was lighter and more portable, which was thought to be an advantage when chasing mobile flocks of birds. The Vickers gun, while perhaps more reliable, was water-cooled and much heavier, a crew-served weapon better suited to a static defensive position. This choice, however, backfired. The Lewis gun's pan magazine was cumbersome to change in a hurry, and the weapon was prone to jamming, issues that proved critical in the brief, frantic moments of engagement with the fast-moving emus. The spiral escalators at Holloway Road Station are a unique piece of London Underground lore. In 1906, an experimental escalator with a spiral design was built, but it never opened to the public. The machinery still remains, sealed off in a dusty chamber next to the modern escalators. It was a bold but ultimately failed experiment, a technological dead end. Like the ghost stations, it's a hidden piece of the tube's history, a reminder of the trial and error, the bold ideas, and the occasional failures that are part of any great engineering story. Heidi Lamar's Austrian accent was a key part of her Hollywood persona. It instantly marked her as exotic and sophisticated. The studios capitalized on this, often casting her in roles as mysterious European women. While it was an asset in her career, it also constantly reminded the audience, and perhaps herself, that she was an outsider. Her voice, like her beauty, was another feature that was packaged and sold, another part of her that was turned into a commodity. It was the sound of the other, which was both her meal ticket and a barrier to being seen as a regular, relatable person. The simple act of setting a table is a quiet ritual of preparation and care. It's a way of transforming a simple eating surface into a space for a shared meal. The placement of the fork, the knife, the spoon, the glass. It's a small grammar of dining. This ritual is a moment of calm before the activity of the meal, a way of signaling that this time is set aside for nourishment and connection. It's an everyday act of creating order, a small piece of domestic art that we perform without even thinking about it, a tradition passed down through countless family dinners. The emus' victory was, in the end, a victory of biology over technology. The birds were perfectly adapted to their environment. Their long legs, keen eyesight, and flocking instincts were the product of millions of years of evolution in the Australian landscape. The soldiers, with their imported technology and conventional tactics, were a foreign element. The story is a beautiful illustration of the principle of home field advantage. The emus didn't need to be smarter or stronger. They just needed to be themselves, in the place where they belonged. Their triumph was a natural, almost inevitable outcome. The distinctive, warm smell of the London Underground is a complex cocktail of scents. It's a mix of ozone from the electric motors, hot metal dust from the brake blocks, dampness from the tunnels, and the faint, lingering scent of millions of human passengers. For Londoners, it's a deeply familiar and strangely comforting smell. It's the scent of the city's inner workings, the aroma of a system that is constantly in motion. It's a sensory signature as unique and recognizable as the roundel logo or the tube map itself. The contrast between Heidi Lamar's two major contributions to the war effort is striking. Her public role was selling war bonds, a performance of her celebrity persona. Her secret contribution was a complex piece of radio technology, a product of her hidden, intellectual self. One was celebrated and photographed. The other was ignored and classified. This duality perfectly encapsulates the central conflict of her life. She was forced to perform the simple, visible task, while her more complex and valuable work was done in the shadows, unseen and unappreciated by the very people she was trying to help. Let's consider the last meal you ate. You likely used a fork, and you did so without a moment's thought. The motions are automatic, ingrained since childhood. This is the ultimate success of an invention, to become so ubiquitous and so integrated into our lives that it becomes invisible. The fork has achieved this state of complete cultural absorption. It is no longer a technology. It is simply part of the background of our lives. Its contentious, centuries-long journey has ended in a state of quiet, unassuming, and complete victory. A final, restful thought on Major Meredith. After the war, he seems to have faded back into military obscurity. There is no grand statue of him, no famous portrait. He is remembered for this one singular and deeply strange episode in his career. His is a quiet legacy of well-intentioned failure. In a way, there is something comforting in his story. It's a reminder that not all of our endeavors need to be successful to be memorable. Sometimes, our most spectacular failures are what make the most interesting and enduring stories. The prescriptions themselves are a horror show of their own. Powders and potions containing things like mercury, lead, or antimony. These are potent poisons, administered in the genuine belief that they would shock the body back to health. The mosaic at the Tottenham Court Road station, designed by the artist Edoardo Palozzi, is a riot of color and frantic energy. It's a vast, sprawling work that captures the vibrancy and chaos of the neighborhood above, with its mix of music shops, electronics stores, and theaters. It's a perfect example of public art that reflects its specific location. Commuters rushing through the station are immersed in a world of abstract shapes and hidden images, saxophones, cameras, Egyptian motifs that mirror the bustling, commercial, and cultural life of the streets they are about to emerge into. Hedy Lamarr's co-inventor, George Antheil, had a history of using technology in his art. His ballet mécanique was a radical attempt to create music using the sounds of the industrial age. He was fascinated by the rhythms and noises of machines. It makes perfect sense that he would be receptive to Hedy's technological idea. He already had a mind that was primed to see the creative potential in mechanical systems. Their collaboration was not as random as it seems. It was a meeting of two minds that were, in their own unique ways, already exploring the intersection of art and technology. As we settle into the final, deepest phase of relaxation, let's think about the concept of boring history. The stories we've heard tonight might be considered footnotes by some. A silly war, an inventor who was a movie star, the history of a utensil. But these boring stories are often the most revealing. They tell us about the texture of daily life, about the strange biases of the past, and about the hidden geniuses and comical failures that are just as much a part of the human story as the great kings and decisive battles. They are the quiet, gentle stories, perfect for a peaceful journey into sleep. The bounty system that replaced the military's Emu War effort was brutally effective. Over a 6-month period in 1934, over 57,000 bounties were claimed. This highlights a key difference between a centralized military operation and a decentralized, incentive-based one. The farmers knew the land, they knew the emus' habits, and they were highly motivated by the direct financial reward. The war wasn't won by superior firepower, but by superior local knowledge and a sustained, grassroots campaign of attrition. It was a victory for economic pragmatism over military pageantry. The concept of Platform Train Interface, or PTI, is the modern technical term for the gap that the Mind the Gap announcement warns of. It's a major safety concern for any subway system. The fact that the London Underground, one of the world's oldest, has so many stations with curved platforms is a legacy of its early construction. The lines were often forced to follow the winding paths of medieval streets above, resulting in tight curves that modern engineering would avoid. The famous warning is a direct, audible consequence of building a 21st century transport system on 19th century foundations that follow a 14th century street plan. Hedy Lamarr's legacy is now being actively curated and celebrated. In 2014, on what would have been her 100th birthday, she was posthumously inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. Documentaries have been made about her life, and books have been written about her scientific contributions. Her story has been reclaimed from the realms of Hollywood gossip and is now told as a story of scientific innovation. This process of historical re-evaluation is a powerful one. showing that it is never too late to give credit where credit is due, and to tell a more complete and truthful version of the past. The modern dining etiquette of leaving one's fork and knife together on the plate to signal that one is finished is a non-verbal language understood across many cultures. Like the "stand on the right" rule in the tube, it's a piece of social code that promotes efficiency and order. It allows a waiter to clear a table without having to ask, a small, silent communication that smooths the process of a meal in a public space. These little rules are the invisible threads that hold our social fabric together, tiny agreements that make our shared lives run a little more gracefully. The Fox movie-tone newsreel of the Emu War, though intended to capture a triumph, ended up documenting a farce. The grainy, black-and-white footage shows the vast, empty landscape, the frustrated-looking soldiers, and the distant, unimpressed emus. The camera, which was meant to be a tool of propaganda, became a tool of accidental comedy. It captured the truth of the situation more effectively than any written report could. The visual evidence of the failure was undeniable, and it played a huge role in turning the war into a public joke. The idea of the London Underground as a character in fiction is a common one. In countless books, films, and TV shows, the tube is more than just a setting. It's a living entity, a labyrinth with its own secrets and dangers. From Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere to the James Bond film Skyfall, the network's dark tunnels and abandoned stations provide a rich backdrop for mystery, fantasy, and adventure. This personification of the tube in popular culture speaks to its deep and resonant place in our collective imagination. It is a world beneath the world, full of untold stories. It is a quiet, satisfying thought that every time you use a Bluetooth headset or connect to a Wi-Fi network, you are using a piece of technology that flows directly from the creative minds of a 1940s movie star and an avant-garde composer. Their secret, patriotic gift to the world, rejected in its time, has become an invisible, indispensable part of modern life. It's a hidden history, a secret connection that hums in the air all around us. Their idea did not just survive. It flourished in ways they could never have imagined, a silent and now celebrated triumph. If your ailment requires something more invasive, like removing a tumor or a bladder stone, you're sent to a barber-surgeon. They're the ones with the sharpest knives and the strongest arms, skilled in both shaving and amputating. As your mind softens and your body grows heavy with relaxation, let all these threads of history gently intertwine. Picture the vast, sunlit plains of Australia, the dark, winding tunnels beneath London, the bright, glamorous lights of a Hollywood set, and the warm, quiet space of your own room. They are all part of the same immense story. A story of human ingenuity, of comical failure, of hidden genius, and of the slow, steady march of ideas. There is nothing left to do now but to let go, to allow the gentle current of these stories to carry you off into a deep and profoundly peaceful sleep. The Australian government's second attempt at the Emu War was, in essence, an admission of the first attempt's failure, but also a refusal to concede defeat to public opinion or the birds themselves. There was a matter of pride at stake. This second campaign, while more statistically successful in terms of emus killed per round fired, still ultimately proved the pointlessness of the exercise. It was a classic case of doubling down on a bad idea, hoping that more effort would fix a flawed strategy. It serves as a gentle reminder that sometimes the wisest course of action is not to try harder, but to recognize that the initial approach was wrong, and to try something completely different. The Johnston typeface, designed for the London Underground, is a masterpiece of humanist sans-serif lettering. Edward Johnston was a master calligrapher, and he brought a scribe's sensibility to the design. It has clean, simple lines, but it also has a warmth and rhythm that comes from its calligraphic origins. For example, the diamond-shaped tittles on the I and J. It was designed for maximum clarity and legibility in challenging conditions, but it also has a profound and understated beauty. It is a typeface that is both perfectly functional and deeply civilized, a quiet embodiment of the entire design philosophy of the Underground. Hedy Lamarr's life after Hollywood was a long, slow fade from the public eye. She was involved in a handful of minor business ventures and lived a quiet, solitary life. Her story is a poignant counterpoint to the typical Hollywood narrative of enduring fame. It shows that celebrity can be fleeting, and that life continues long after the spotlight has moved on. Her re-emergence in the 1990s as a celebrated inventor was a final, unexpected act in a life full of them. It was a vindication that came not from Hollywood, but from a completely different world, one that finally saw her for her mind, not just her face. Let's consider the simple act of spearing a piece of food with a fork. It is a controlled, miniature act of hunting. It connects us, in a very distant and civilized way, to our most ancient ancestors. The fork tamed and miniaturized this action, turning it from a matter of survival into a matter of etiquette. It is a symbol of how far we have come, a way of acknowledging our primal past while keeping it at a polite, well-mannered distance. Every time you lift a piece of steak to your mouth, you are participating in a long, unbroken history of human sustenance, refined over centuries into a simple, graceful movement. The terrain of the Emu War was a significant factor. The wheat belt is not a dense forest, it's open country. This should have been a machine gunner's dream, but the emus used the subtle folds in the land, the scattered patches of scrub, and the sheer vast distances to their advantage. They understood the art of not being seen. Major Meredith's frustration was that of a naval captain trying to fight a fleet of submarines in an ocean full of hiding places. The battlefield itself was the emu's greatest weapon, and it was a battlefield the Australian Army had not been trained to fight on. The heat and air pressure in the deep-level tube tunnels are a noticeable physical phenomenon. The combination of braking trains, electrical equipment, and thousands of human bodies generates a significant amount of heat that gets trapped in the deep tunnels. The temperature on some platforms can be uncomfortably high, especially in the summer. It's a constant engineering challenge to ventilate and cool the system. This palpable warmth is a physical manifestation of the immense energy that is required to keep the city moving, a constant reminder of the powerful hidden machinery at work all around you. Hedy Lamiz's intellectual curiosity was wide-ranging. She was not just interested in technology, but in art, music, and science in general. She was a true polymath, a person with a broad and diverse range of interests. This kind of mind is often the most innovative, because it can draw connections between seemingly unrelated fields. Her ability to link player pianos to torpedo guidance is a perfect example of this. She wasn't a narrow specialist. She was a creative thinker whose mind was open to any and all interesting ideas, regardless of their origin. The social anxiety that the fork once produced has now been transferred to other, more modern aspects of dining. Today, people might feel anxiety about which wine to order, how to pronounce a foreign dish, or the etiquette of using a smartphone at the table. The objects and rules may change, but the underlying social dynamics remain. We are still using the rituals of dining to navigate social hierarchies and signal our own cultural capital. The fork may no longer be a test, but the dinner table itself remains a stage for a quiet and often stressful social performance. Let's think about the perspective of a single emu in the Great Emu War. A loud, terrifying noise erupts from a strange, stationary object. The ground around you kicks up with dust. The flock's leader gives a cry, and an instinctive, overwhelming urge to run takes over. You don't know what the threat is, only that it is deadly, and that survival depends on speed and erratic movement. It's a pure, primal response to danger. The emus didn't outsmart the army in a conscious, strategic sense. They simply followed the evolutionary programming that had kept their species alive for millennia. And in this case, ancient instinct proved to be far more effective than modern military strategy. The operation would take place on a table, perhaps in your own home. You'd be given a shot of brandy and a leather strap to bite down on. The surgeon's only measure of skill was speed, to minimize the time you spent screaming. The London Underground's role as a film location has made it a familiar landscape even to those who have never been to London. The long, curved platforms, the endless escalators, the labyrinthine corridors, they have become a visual shorthand for the modern metropolis, a space that can be thrilling, dangerous, romantic, or alienating, depending on the story being told. The Tube is one of the most versatile and recognizable film sets in the world, a real, working environment that has also become a powerful and flexible cinematic space. It is remarkable that Hedy Lamarr, as a Jewish refugee who had fled the Nazis, offered her invention to the Allied war effort. Her contribution was not just intellectual, it was deeply personal and political. She had a direct, visceral stake in the defeat of the Axis powers. This context adds a layer of moral weight to her story. Her invention was not a mere intellectual exercise. It was her way of fighting back against the forces that had destroyed her home and threatened her people. It was an act of patriotism and a personal blow against tyranny. The modern, mass-produced stainless steel fork is a minor miracle of metallurgy and manufacturing. Stainless steel, an alloy of iron, chromium, and other elements, is resistant to rust and corrosion, making it perfect for cutlery. The process of stamping, shaping, and polishing a fork is a highly automated and incredibly efficient one. The fork that you can buy for a pittance is the result of over a century of innovation in materials science and industrial production. It is a humble but perfect example of how technology has made a once precious object into a durable, affordable, and accessible tool for everyone. The final legacy of the Emu War is its sheer, delightful silliness. In a world full of serious, complex, and often tragic historical events, the story of the Emu War provides a moment of pure, unadulterated absurdity. It's a historical palate cleanser. It reminds us that the past was not always a solemn and serious place. It was also at times ridiculous, illogical, and deeply, deeply funny. And that laughter, that sense of shared amusement at the follies of our ancestors, is a valuable and joyful way to connect with history. The transition from steam to electric power was the single most important technological leap in the London Underground's history. It solved the crippling problem of smoke and fumes, allowing for the construction of the much deeper tube lines. The air became cleaner, the stations brighter, and the journeys more pleasant. This transition, which took place around the turn of the 20th century, was the key that unlocked the network's future, transforming it from a grimy Victorian ordeal into a modern, efficient, and far more civilized mode of transport. The rediscovery of Heidi Lamar's story in the 1990s was spurred on by the burgeoning digital culture. As the internet grew, early tech pioneers and writers began to explore the history of their field, sharing stories on forums and a secret history involving a glamorous star, a brilliant invention, and a clueless military. The internet allowed her story to spread organically, outside of mainstream media, until it became so well known that the mainstream had no choice but to pay attention. It was a grassroots historical revival, powered by the very technologies she helped to create. The fork's journey has now come full circle. In our increasingly casual dining culture, the use of hands for certain foods, like pizza or tacos or a hamburger, is perfectly acceptable in almost any social situation. We have reached a state of relaxed confidence where we can choose the right tool for the job, whether it's a fork, a spoon, or our own two hands. The fork is no longer a rigid symbol of class or piety. It is simply an option, a useful and elegant tool among many. It has, at last, found its proper, balanced place at our table. As we draw to a close, let's allow our minds to rest on the idea of hiddenness. The emus, hidden in the vastness of the landscape. The underground, a hidden city beneath our feet. The brilliant mind of Heidi Lamar, hidden behind a beautiful face. The long, contentious history of the fork, hidden within a simple, everyday object. The world is full of these hidden stories, these secret depths. And the act of relaxing, of letting our conscious minds quiet down, is a way of allowing these deeper, quieter truths to surface. It is a gentle exploration of the hidden parts of our own minds, a peaceful journey into the quiet that lies beneath the noise of the day. The Emu War serves as a timeless parable about the limits of human control. We build our farms, our cities, our systems, but nature has a persistent way of reminding us that we are not entirely in charge. A flock of birds, a storm, a virus, these things can disrupt our carefully laid plans in an instant. The story of the emus is a gentle, humorous nudge, a reminder to maintain a healthy respect for the chaotic, unpredictable, and powerful forces of the natural world that operate just beyond the edges of our control. So, before you get too comfortable, take a quick moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's the simplest way to support the channel, and it really does help. So as you lie there feeling the gentle comfort of your bed, just take a moment to appreciate the quiet, sterile, and mercifully gentle nature of modern medicine. It's a luxury those in the 1700s could never have imagined. The London Underground map, in its beautiful simplicity, is a form of consensual fiction. We all agree to pretend that the distance between stations is uniform, and that the lines are perfectly straight, because it makes the system easier to understand. This shared fiction is incredibly useful, a tool that allows millions of people to navigate a complex reality. It's a powerful example of how an elegant abstraction can be more true for a specific purpose than the messy, complicated reality it represents. We choose clarity over accuracy, and in doing so, we make the city work. Heidi Lamar's story is ultimately one of identity. Was she Hedwig Kiesler, the curious girl from Vienna? Heidi Lamar, the glamorous movie star? Heidi Kiesler Markey, the patent holder? Or the reclusive woman living out her final years in Florida? She was, of course, all of these things. Her life shows us that identity is not a single, fixed thing, but a complex, layered, and often contradictory collection of roles and selves. We all contain these multitudes. Her story is a permission slip to embrace all the different, and sometimes conflicting, parts of who we are. And finally, the fork. That small, familiar object is a testament to the slow, creeping pace of cultural change. Ideas that are once scandalous and revolutionary can, over centuries, become so normal that they are rendered invisible. The journey of the fork from a symbol of sin to a tool of civility is a quiet lesson in patience. It reminds us that change is often not a sudden event, but a long, slow process of adaptation and acceptance. The world is constantly, gradually, and quietly remaking itself, one small, forgotten decision at a time. Let us take one last, gentle breath together. Breathe in the quiet of the room, and as you breathe out, let go of the last remnants of the day. Let go of the need to think, to analyze, to understand. The stories have been told. The journey is complete. All that is left is to rest. To allow the mind to become as still and quiet as a forgotten tunnel deep beneath the city. As peaceful as a wide, empty plain after the noise has faded. There is only the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, a soft, steady anchor in the peaceful darkness. The tale of the Emu War is a perfect bedtime story because its stakes are, in retrospect, wonderfully low. No great empires fell, no profound ideologies were at stake. It was, at its heart, a conflict over crops. This lack of gravity is what makes it so soothing. It's a reminder that not all of history is heavy and consequential. Much of it is small, strange, and endearingly human. It's a story that asks nothing of you but a gentle smile as you drift off, a quiet acknowledgement of life's boundless capacity for the absurd. The London Underground, in the deep of the night, is a different world. After the last train has run and the passengers have gone home, the network comes alive with a new kind of activity. This is the time of the fluffers, the maintenance crews who walk the tracks, cleaning the tunnels of the dust, litter, and hair that accumulates each day. It's a constant, unseen battle against decay, a nightly ritual of renewal that ensures the system is ready for the morning's first commuters. The sleeping city is unaware of this hidden army, keeping the heart of London clean and ready to beat again. Heidi Lamar's brain was a place of beautiful contradictions. She could calculate the trajectory of a torpedo and also understand the nuances of a film script. She could appreciate the beauty of a couture gown and also the elegance of an engineering schematic. Her mind was not divided between art and science. It saw the beauty in both. This holistic way of thinking is a gentle ideal to drift off with. The idea that logic and creativity are not opposites, but two sides of the same coin, two different languages for describing the wonders of the world. The history of the fork is, above all, a story about what it means to be clean. The initial resistance to it was not based on a lack of hygiene, but a different concept of it. For centuries, a clean hand, washed before and after a meal, was the height of good manners. The fork introduced a new idea, that true cleanliness meant avoiding contact altogether. This shift in thinking is profound. It reflects a growing separation between our bodies and the world around us, a desire for a new kind of purity that has shaped our modern world in countless ways. Let's imagine, for a final sleepy moment, the sound of the emus. Not the panicked cries during the war, but their normal everyday calls. The male emu makes a guttural grunting sound, while the female produces a deep, resonant booming. It's a strange and ancient sound, a thrumming that seems to come from the earth itself. Picture yourself hearing that sound carrying across the quiet plains at dusk. It is the sound of a creature perfectly at home in its world, a sound of resilience and endurance, a deep, peaceful drumming to lull you into a state of profound rest. The ambient noise of the tube is a form of white noise for many Londoners. The steady, rhythmic clatter of the train on the tracks, the hum of the ventilation, the muffled announcements, these sounds can be incredibly hypnotic. They create a consistent and predictable soundscape that can block out more jarring noises. For the regular commuter, it can be a moment of enforced tranquility, a time to be alone with one's thoughts, rocked by the gentle rumbling motion of the city's secret river, flowing steadily through the darkness below. Now let's drift across the globe and forward in time to a story that feels less like a grim medical drama and more like a surreal historical comedy. We're heading to Australia in the year 1932. The world was in the grips of the Great Depression, and in the vast arid lands of Western Australia, a new and unusual conflict was brewing. Following the First World War, the Australian government had settled thousands of veterans on marginal farmland, promising them a new life tilling the soil. But the land was unforgiving, and their dreams of agrarian peace were about to be shattered by an invasion, not from a foreign power, but from a very large, very flightless bird. The stage was being set for what would go down in history as the Great Emu War. Hedy Lamarr's story is a testament to the power of a secret. For decades, her invention was her secret, a hidden part of her identity that the world did not know. This secret knowledge may have been a source of private pride and validation, especially when her public life felt shallow and unfulfilling. It was a core of self-esteem that was immune to the critics and the gossip columns. We all have these private, hidden parts of ourselves, the things we know and value that the outside world may not see. Her story is a quiet celebration of that inner world. The fork has won. It sits in our drawers, nestled quietly against the spoons. Its long battle for acceptance is over. It asks nothing of us now but to be used. This sense of settled history is deeply calming. The great debates have ended, the controversies have faded, and what is left is a simple, useful object. So many things in our lives are like this. Their turbulent histories have resolved into a quiet and stable present. As you sleep, you can rest in that stability, in the comforting knowledge that the battles of the past have, in many small ways, been settled. The vastness of the Australian outback is a powerful sleep aid in itself. Imagining that immense, empty space, stretching for thousands of miles under a canopy of brilliant stars, can help to put our own small worries into perspective. In that great, silent landscape, our daily anxieties can seem very far away. The story of the Emu War is just one tiny, brief flicker of activity in a place that is defined by its immense age and its profound, enduring quiet. Let your mind expand into that quiet, into that vastness, and find its own peaceful equilibrium. The darkness of the tube tunnels between stations is an absolute, perfect black. For the few seconds that the carriage is between the pools of light of the platforms, there is no light at all from the outside world. It is a moment of pure sensory deprivation, a brief, fleeting journey through a void. This regular plunge into total darkness is a strange and unique part of the tube experience. It is a moment of reset, a brief pause in the visual noise of the city, a small, dark silence in the middle of a journey. The image of Hedy Lamarr at her drafting table is a powerful symbol of the creative process. It is a quiet, solitary, and often frustrating endeavor. It is the work that happens when no one is watching. Her story reminds us that the most important work is often the least glamorous. It is not done on a stage or in front of a camera, but in the quiet hours of focused effort. It is a celebration of the humble, patient, and often unseen labor that is required to bring a new idea into the world. The fork, the knife, and the spoon make up a small, harmonious family of tools. Each has its own distinct purpose and personality. The sharp, decisive knife, the gentle, receptive spoon, and the versatile, practical fork. Together, they allow us to handle almost any kind of food with grace and efficiency. Their silent, coordinated dance on our plates is a small, everyday ballet of functionality. They are a perfect team, a testament to the beauty of specialized tools working together in perfect harmony. The story of the Emu War, in its final analysis, is a story about underestimation. The Australian military underestimated the emus. They underestimated the difficulty of the terrain. They underestimated the unsuitability of their own equipment. It is a gentle but firm lesson in the dangers of arrogance. It teaches us to approach new problems with curiosity and humility, because the moment we assume we have all the answers is often the moment just before we are about to be proven comprehensively and embarrassingly wrong. The disused tunnels of the London Underground network are sometimes used for other purposes. Some are used for storage, others for ventilation, and some have been leased by communications companies to run fiber optic cables. The old pathways are being repurposed for new technologies. This is a beautiful metaphor for the city itself. A constant process of building new layers on top of the old, of finding new uses for historic infrastructure. The past is not just buried and forgotten, it is the foundation upon which the present is constantly being built and rebuilt. Hedy Lamarr's beauty was both a blessing and a curse. It opened doors for her, but it also trapped her in a gilded cage of expectations. Her life is a profound meditation on the complexities of physical appearance. It challenges us to think about how we perceive others, and how often we allow a person's surface to prevent us from seeing their depth. Her story is a plea to look closer, to listen more carefully, and to seek out the hidden intellect and character that lies beneath the beautiful, distracting facade. The weight of a good, solid fork in your hand is a satisfying feeling. It has a pleasing heft, a sense of purpose. This tactile sensation is part of its appeal. It feels reliable, a sturdy and trustworthy tool for the task at hand. This simple, physical connection to the object is something we rarely notice, but it is a part of its long history. A fork that feels good in the hand is a fork that has been well designed, the product of centuries of refinement in search of the perfect balance of form, function, and feel. The problem began after the breeding season, when a massive flock of emus, estimated at over 20,000 strong, began their annual migration from the interior towards the coast. Ordinarily, this was a normal part of the ecological calendar, but this time, their path took them directly through the newly established wheat farms in the Campion district. For the emus, these vast fields of cultivated crops were a paradise, an all-you-can-eat buffet laid out just for them. They descended upon the wheat fields with gusto, not only eating the grain but also trampling the crops and knocking down the flimsy fences, which in turn allowed hordes of rabbits to get in and cause even more damage. The farmers, already struggling with the depression and a wheat glut, were facing absolute ruin. The quiet aftermath of the Emu War, the turn to the bounty system, is a story of pragmatism. The grand, theatrical military solution had failed. What worked was a quieter, more practical, and more distributed approach. There is a soothing lesson in this. The best solution to a problem is not always the most dramatic one. Often, it is the slow, steady, and patient application of a simple, workable idea that wins the day. Progress is not always a loud bang. Sometimes, it is a quiet, sustained effort. Imagine being a child in London during the Blitz, sleeping on a bunk in a tube station. The strange underground world would have been both frightening and magical. The roar of the trains, the echoing voices, the sense of being in a secret subterranean city. For a child, it would have been a great, strange adventure. This perspective adds a layer of poignant innocence to the grim reality of the situation. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human capacity for wonder, imagination, and play can still find a way to shine through. Hedy Lamarr's story is a powerful argument for the importance of hobbies and side projects. Her real job was acting, but her passion, her true intellectual engagement was in her inventing. This hobby turned out to be her most enduring legacy. It's a wonderful reminder that the things we do for love, for curiosity, for the sheer joy of creation, are often the most meaningful parts of our lives. They are where we can be our most authentic selves, free from the expectations and constraints of our professional roles. The fork, in its final, perfected form, is an object of quiet confidence. It makes no grand claims. It does not demand attention. It simply does its job, and it does it well. There is a deep, soothing quality in this kind of humble competence. In a world full of noise and clamor, the fork is a silent testament to the virtues of good design, quiet utility, and the slow, patient process of getting something just right. It is a small, everyday object that has achieved a state of perfect, unassuming grace. As your journey tonight comes to its gentle end, allow your mind to be like the vast, quiet Australian landscape after the war was over. The brief commotion has passed. The noise has faded, and what remains is a deep, abiding peace. The land endures, the sky is endless, and all is calm. Let this feeling of immense, peaceful quietude settle over you. There are no more stories to follow, no more facts to learn. There is only this moment, this breath, and the soft, inviting stillness of sleep. Let the rhythmic imaginary clatter of the tube train be the final sound that carries you off. A steady, rocking motion, a consistent, hypnotic rhythm. You are safe in your carriage, moving smoothly through the darkness. The world outside is distant and muffled. There is nothing to do but relax into the journey, to trust that you are being carried safely to your destination, which is a night of deep, restorative, and peaceful sleep. Let the gentle motion rock you, soothe you, and deliver you completely to your rest. Heidi Lamar, the fork, the emus, the underground. All these stories are now drifting away, like faint echoes in a long tunnel. They have served their purpose, to gently occupy your mind and lead you to the threshold of sleep. Now it is time to cross that threshold, to let go of the narrative, to let go of the voice, and to sink into the pure, silent, and blissfully empty state of deep sleep. Rest well, and thank you for listening. The story is over. Your rest begins now. Nourishun, L-I-P-S-A. Narashin, L-I-P-S-A. Narachun, L-I-P-S-A. Desperate, the farmer settlers, many of whom were ex-soldiers themselves, appealed to the government for help. They knew how to handle a rifle, but they were simply outnumbered by the feathered horde. A deputation was sent to meet with the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pierce. Their request was a strange one. They wanted the government to deploy machine guns to deal with the emu menace. It was an unconventional proposal, to be sure, but Sir George was surprisingly receptive. Perhaps seeing a chance for some good PR, or maybe just swayed by the sheer absurdity of it all, he agreed. The Australian military would officially declare war on the emu population of Western Australia. It was a decision that would soon become a source of national embarrassment and endless amusement. The military force dispatched to fight this war was, to be fair, quite small. It consisted of Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery, accompanied by 2 soldiers, Sergeant S. McMurray and Gunner J. O'Halloran. Their heavy artillery consisted of 2 Lewis automatic machine guns and an impressive 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The plan seemed straightforward. The farmers would act as beaters, herding the emus into range of the machine gun nests, at which point the soldiers would open fire and mow them down. The government had even arranged for a Fox Movietone cinematographer to capture the glorious victory on film. On paper, it was a simple pest control operation with military-grade hardware. In practice, it was about to become a lesson in feathered guerrilla warfare. The first engagement took place on the 2nd of November, 1932. A flock of about 50 emus was spotted, and the locals eagerly corralled them towards the waiting machine gun. The soldiers waited until the birds were at point-blank range before opening fire. A brief rattle of gunfire echoed across the plains. When the dust settled, however, only a handful of emus lay dead. The rest, seemingly unharmed, had scattered in every direction at the first sound of trouble. The thick feathers of the emus, combined with their surprising speed and erratic movements, made them incredibly difficult targets. The Lewis gun, designed to suppress enemy infantry, was proving ineffective against this highly mobile, non-human foe. The first battle was a decisive victory for the emus. A couple of days later, Major Meredith planned a new strategy. A large flock of over 1,000 emus had been spotted near a local dam, and he decided to set up an ambush. This, he thought, would be the decisive battle. The soldiers concealed themselves in their Lewis gun, waiting for the birds to come in for a drink. But the emus were proving to be cunning strategists. They approached the dam cautiously, in small, dispersed groups, staying well out of effective machine gun range. As the main flock drew near, the gunners opened fire once more. After 1,000 rounds had been spent, the official casualty count was a meager 12 birds. To add insult to injury, one of the Lewis guns jammed at a critical moment, allowing the bulk of the enemy to melt away into the bush. Major Meredith was growing a grudging respect for his avian adversaries. In his official report, he noted the almost uncanny ability of the emus to organize and evade. He famously commented, If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. They can face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks. He observed that each flock seemed to have a leader, a tall, black-plumed bird that would stand watch while the others fed, giving a warning cry at the first sign of danger, allowing the group to scatter before the gunners could get a proper bead on them. The Australian army, which had faced the hardened soldiers of the Ottoman and German empires, was being thoroughly outsmarted by a population of flightless birds. News of the military's struggles soon reached the press back east, and the Emu War became a running joke. Ornithologists in Perth condemned the cull as barbaric, while politicians in Canberra began to question the wisdom of using the army for pest control. The cinematographers sent to capture the triumph had nothing but footage of birds running away and soldiers looking frustrated. The whole affair was turning into a public relations disaster. Major Meredith's small force continued their campaign for a few more days, chasing small, elusive flocks across the vast landscape, firing thousands of rounds for very few kills. The cost of ammunition was far exceeding the value of the damaged crops they were supposed to be protecting. The war was not going well. By the 8th of November, less than a week after it began, the first campaign of the Great Emu War was called off. The military officially withdrew. In the House of Representatives, Sir George Pearce defended the operation, but the damage was done. The press had a field day, with one newspaper joking that the emus had employed guerrilla tactics and won. The farmers were, of course, still stuck with their problem. The emus, having seen off the Australian army, returned to their gleeful destruction of the wheat crops. The first round had been a complete and utter victory for the birds. It was a bizarre, humbling moment for a nation that prided itself on its rugged, can-do attitude. And as always, I love to see how far these stories travel, so please let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. It's wonderful to see our little community of history-loving insomniacs grow. The farmers' pleas, however, did not cease. The emu problem was worse than ever. After a heated debate and under immense pressure from the agricultural lobby, the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pearce, reluctantly authorized a second military operation later that same month. Major Meredith was once again sent into the field, though perhaps with a little less optimism this time. The army had learned from its earlier failures. They adopted new tactics, engaging smaller groups and getting closer before opening fire. This second campaign was statistically more successful. Over a period of about a month, the soldiers managed to kill just under 1,000 emus, using nearly 10,000 rounds of ammunition to do so, a kill rate of about 10 bullets per bird. Despite the higher body count, the operation was ultimately deemed a failure once again. The emu population was so vast that 1,000 casualties made little difference, and the financial cost was simply unjustifiable. In December of 1932, the military withdrew for the final time. The Great Emu War was officially over. The government, having learned its lesson, turned to a more traditional and ultimately more effective solution, a bounty system. They offered a payment for every emu killed by the farmers themselves. This decentralized, sustained campaign of attrition eventually succeeded where the might of the military had failed, and the emu population was brought under control. The war had been lost, but the long, slow peace was eventually won by civilians. The legacy of the Great Emu War is a strange and wonderful one. It's a footnote in military history that reads like a Monty Python sketch. It serves as a humorous reminder of humanity's occasional arrogance in the face of nature and a testament to the surprising resilience and tactical genius of the humble emu. Major Meredith and his men fought bravely, but they were engaged in a conflict they could never truly win. And as you drift off to sleep, you can perhaps smile at the thought of those tough, clever birds who once took on the Australian army and won, proving that sometimes history is not written by the victors with the biggest guns, but by the survivors with the longest legs. From the sun-baked plains of Australia, let's now travel to a place of shadow and steam, of ingenious engineering and societal transformation. Our next story is burrowed deep beneath the streets of one of the world's greatest cities. We're going to explore the birth and growth of the London Underground. In the middle of the 19th century, London was the largest and most prosperous city on Earth, the heart of a global empire. But it was also choking on its own success. Its ancient, narrow streets were hopelessly congested with a chaotic mess of horse-drawn carts, omnibuses, carriages, and pedestrians. The journey from one side of the city to the other could take hours. A slow, frustrating crawl through a city gridlocked by its own relentless energy. London desperately needed a new way to move. The idea of an underground railway had been floated for decades, often in fantastical and impractical forms. But it was a man named Charles Pearson, a solicitor for the City of London, who became its most tireless and effective champion. He envisioned a system that would not only alleviate the crippling traffic, but also allow the city's poor to move out of the squalid, overcrowded central slums and into healthier suburbs. He saw it as a tool of social reform as much as an engineering project. For years, he campaigned, lobbied, and argued, facing immense skepticism. The idea of burrowing beneath buildings, of running smoke-belching trains in subterranean tunnels, seemed preposterous and dangerous to many. But Pearson was persistent, and his vision slowly, painstakingly began to gain traction. The primary challenge was a practical one. How do you actually build a railway under a city? The solution they settled on was brutally simple and hugely disruptive. It was called the cut-and-cover method. It involved digging a massive trench down the middle of an existing street, laying the railway tracks at the bottom, building a brick tunnel arch over the top, and then simply putting the road back. For years, major London thoroughfares like Euston Road and Marylebone Road were transformed into vast, chaotic construction sites. Buildings were underpinned, gas and water mains were rerouted, and the city's residents had to navigate a landscape of gaping trenches, timber scaffolding, and mountains of excavated earth. It was a messy, noisy, and expensive birth for a revolutionary idea. On January 10, 1863, the dream became a reality. The Metropolitan Railway, the world's first underground line, opened to the public. It ran for just under 4 miles from Paddington to Farringdon Street. On its first day, 38,000 people queued up, eager to experience this modern marvel. The journey was an assault on the senses. The carriages were wooden, lit by dim gas lamps that flickered in the gloom. And because the locomotives were steam-powered, the tunnels were filled with a thick, sulfurous smoke that stung the eyes and coated every surface with soot. It was dirty, smelly, and a little bit terrifying. Yet, it was a miracle. A journey that took an hour on the street above could now be completed in a matter of minutes. The immediate success of the Metropolitan Railway sparked a boom in underground construction. A rival company, the District Railway, was soon formed, and the two began an ambitious project to create a complete loop around the city center, the Inner Circle. Their relationship, however, was fraught with bitter rivalry and financial squabbles. They used different types of locomotives and carriages, and often refused to cooperate, leading to frustrating gaps and delays in the network. For years, the two companies clawed their way toward each other, their tunnels slowly encircling the heart of London. It took over 20 years of bickering and building before the Circle Line was finally completed in 1884, a testament to both Victorian ambition and Victorian stubbornness. While the cut-and-cover lines were a success, they were limited to following the paths of existing wide streets. The next great leap in underground technology would allow railways to be built deep beneath the city, independent of the street plan above. This was made possible by the invention of the Great Head Shield, a large, circular iron cylinder that could be forced through the soft London clay, allowing workers to excavate the tunnel from within its protective shell. This method created the distinctive, round tunnels that gave the deep-level lines their famous nickname, the Tube. It was a safer, less disruptive, and more versatile way to build, and it would unlock the future of the network. The first railway to use this new technology was the City and South London Railway, which opened in 1890. It was not only the first deep-level tube line, but also the world's first major electric railway. By using electric locomotives, it solved the critical problem of ventilation that plagued the steam-operated lines. There was no smoke, no soot, just the clean, quiet hum of electric motors. The carriages were small and cramped, with tiny windows set high up, earning them the nickname padded cells. But it was a glimpse of the future. The combination of the deep-level tunnel and electric traction was the formula that would allow the underground to expand rapidly across London in the decades to come. Now dim the lights, maybe pull the covers up a little closer, settle in, and let your breathing slow. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. starting with a trip to the past that required a very strong stomach. By the turn of the 20th century, London's underground network was a fragmented mess of competing private companies, many of which were on the brink of bankruptcy. It took an American tycoon, Charles Tyson Yerkes, to bring order to the chaos. Yerkes had made his fortune building streetcar systems in Chicago, often through ruthless means. He arrived in London in 1900 and, in a whirlwind of aggressive financial maneuvering, bought up most of the struggling tube lines. He formed the Underground Electric Railways Company of London, Limited (UERL), and poured money into modernizing and integrating the system. Yerkes was a controversial figure, but his vision and capital were instrumental in creating the unified, coherent underground network that we know today. Just as important as the engineering was the creation of a powerful and unified brand identity. This was the work of another visionary, a man named Frank Pick. Hired by Yerkes, Pick believed that good design was good business. He commissioned the iconic solid red circle and blue bar logo, the roundel, which is now a globally recognized symbol of London. He also hired the calligrapher Edward Johnston to create a unique, clean, and legible typeface, Johnston Sans, which is still used across the network. Pick's philosophy of total design extended to everything from the architecture of the stations to the patterns on the seat upholstery, creating a sense of unity and quality that elevated the underground from a mere mode of transport to a cultural institution. Perhaps the most famous piece of this design legacy is the tube map itself. Before the 1930s, maps of the underground were geographically accurate, showing every twist and turn of the lines. This made them cluttered and difficult to read. In 1931, an engineering draftsman named Harry Beck had a radical idea. He proposed a schematic map, a diagram that sacrificed geographical accuracy for clarity. He straightened the lines, spaced the stations evenly, and used a simple color-coded system. His map, based on the principles of an electrical circuit diagram, was initially rejected as too revolutionary. But after a successful trial, it was adopted and became an instant classic, a masterpiece of information design that has influenced transit maps all over the world. The Underground's most profound and poignant chapter came during the Second World War. As the bombs of the Blitz began to fall on London in 1940, the deep-level tube stations were transformed into the city's largest public air raid shelters. At first, the government was against the idea, fearing it would create a, quote, deep shelter mentality. But Londoners, in a remarkable act of spontaneous civil disobedience, simply bought platform tickets and refused to leave. They brought blankets, food, and flasks of tea, setting up makeshift communities on the platforms. The government quickly relented, and soon the stations were officially equipped with bunks, first aid posts, and canteens, providing nightly refuge for up to 177,000 people. Life in the tube shelters was a strange mix of fear, boredom, and camaraderie. The sound of the anti-aircraft guns and distant explosions was muffled by the earth above. People slept on the platforms, on the escalators, and even on the tracks after the power was switched off. There were concerts, library services, and a spirit of shared endurance. The Underground became a symbol of London's resilience, a place where the city's inhabitants huddled together in the dark, waiting for the all-clear siren. It was a testament to the network's deep-rooted place in the city's psyche, a part of its very foundations, both literally and figuratively. After the war, the story of the Underground became one of continuous modernization and expansion. The 1960s saw the construction of the Victoria Line, a marvel of automated train operation and a vital new artery for the city. The late 20th century brought the ambitious Jubilee Line extension, with its cathedral-like architect-designed stations that were celebrated as triumphs of public architecture. And in the 21st century, the brand-new Elizabeth Line has once again redefined east-west travel across the capital. The network continues to evolve, a living system that adapts to the changing needs of the city it serves, a constant work in progress that is never truly finished. Today, the London Underground is far more than just a transportation system. It is the city's circulatory system, a cultural icon, and a mobile museum of design and engineering history. It's a place of quiet contemplation for the solitary commuter and a bustling hub of human interaction. Its familiar sounds, the Mind the Gap announcement, the rumble of an approaching train, the chime of the closing doors, are part of the essential soundtrack of London life. From its smoky, Victorian beginnings to its sleek, modern present, the Tube is a story of a city constantly remaking itself, a reminder that sometimes the greatest progress is made by digging deep and moving forward in the dark. Our next story takes us away from the grit and grime of industrial history and into the glamour and intrigue of old Hollywood. But with a surprising twist. It's the story of a woman who was celebrated by the world for her breathtaking beauty, but whose brilliant mind remained her best-kept secret. This is the story of Hedy Lamarr, the movie star who was also a pioneering inventor. She was born Hedwig Eva Maria Kiesler in 1914 in Vienna, Austria, into a prosperous Jewish family. From a young age, she was not only strikingly beautiful, but also intensely curious, often dismantling and reassembling her toys, fascinated by how things worked. Her father, a bank director, would take her on long walks, explaining the inner workings of everything from streetcars to printing presses, nurturing an inquisitive spirit that would define her life in secret. Her beauty, however, was what the world noticed first. As a teenager, she was discovered by a film director and began a promising acting career in Europe. In 1933, at the age of 18, she starred in a controversial Czech film called Ecstasy. The film was scandalous for its time, featuring scenes of Heidi swimming in the nude and, most famously, a close-up of her face during a moment of passion. It was banned in many countries, including the United States, and earned her a reputation as a femme fatale. While it made her famous, it also typecast her, a pattern that would follow her for the rest of her career. The world saw a beautiful face and a scandalous body, overlooking the sharp intellect behind her eyes. That same year, she entered into a disastrous first marriage with Friedrich Mandl, one of the wealthiest men in Austria. Mandl was an arms manufacturer who sold munitions to the governments of both Italy and Germany. He was incredibly controlling and possessive, treating Heidi as a beautiful trophy to be shown off at his lavish dinner parties. He tried to buy up every copy of Ecstasy to erase her past. Heidi later described this period as living in a, quote, gilded cage. However, Mandl's obsession with controlling her had an unintended side effect. He often took her to business meetings with his clients, who were military leaders and weapons scientists. Believing her to be a simple, beautiful woman, they would openly discuss the latest in military technology right in front of her. Let's imagine for a moment. You're in your modest home in the year, say, 1760, and you feel unwell. Not just a sniffle, but a deep, rattling cough and a fever that has you shivering under your wool blankets. Forced to attend these dinners, Hedy listened intently. She was bored by the small talk, but fascinated by the technical discussions. She learned about guided torpedoes, remote-controlled weapons, and the complex problems of radio interference and signal jamming. Her mind absorbed the technical details, filing away information about the cutting edge of weapons systems technology. Her husband and his associates had no idea that the silent, beautiful woman at the table was not just listening, but understanding. She was gathering the intellectual ammunition for her own future, a future that would be far more significant than they could ever imagine. This forced education in military science would become the foundation for her greatest and most unheralded achievement. Life with Mandl became unbearable. He was intensely jealous, and his ties to the rising fascist powers in Europe were deeply troubling to Hedy. She knew she had to escape. In 1937, in a plot worthy of one of her own films, she reportedly disguised herself as her own maid and fled her husband's castle, escaping first to Paris and then to London. The details of her escape are shrouded in a bit of personal myth-making, but the core fact remains. She bravely left behind a life of immense wealth and suffocating control to reclaim her own freedom. In London, her life would take another dramatic turn. She arranged a meeting with Louis B. Mayer, the head of the legendary MGM film studio. Louis B. Mayer was initially hesitant to hire her because of her scandalous reputation from the film Ecstasy. But he couldn't deny her star power. He signed her to a contract, changed her name from Hedwig Kiesler to Hedy Lamarr, and brought her to Hollywood. She was marketed as the most beautiful woman in the world, and her exotic European allure made her an instant star. She appeared in a string of successful films throughout the 1940s, starring alongside Hollywood legends like Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, and James Stewart. On-screen, she was the epitome of glamour and sophistication, but off-screen, she was growing increasingly frustrated and bored. Hollywood, she found, was just a different kind of gilded cage. She was given one-dimensional roles that required her to do little more than look beautiful and deliver her lines. Her intellect, the curious, inventive part of her that her father had nurtured, was completely ignored. "Any girl can be glamorous," she once famously said. "All you have to do is stand still and look stupid." To combat the mind-numbing boredom of her day job, she turned to her true passion, inventing. She had a drafting table set up in her trailer on movie sets. In her spare time, she worked on ideas, from a tablet that would dissolve in water to create a carbonated drink, to new designs for traffic lights. Her inventive talent was not just a hobby, it was serious. She was friends with the eccentric billionaire Howard Hughes, who was obsessed with aviation. Recognizing her sharp mind, Hughes took her ideas seriously. She suggested to him that the wings on his airplanes were too square, and that a more streamlined, curved design, modeled on the fins of the fastest fish and the wings of the swiftest birds, would make them fly faster. Hughes was impressed, and later said that Hitty was a genius. It was a rare moment of recognition for a side of her that she kept almost entirely hidden from the public eye. But her greatest invention was yet to come, born out of a desire to contribute to a world at war. When the Second World War broke out in Europe, Hitty was horrified by the news coming from her homeland. As a Jewish woman who had escaped the rising tide of fascism, she felt a desperate need to do something to help the Allied cause. She was an American citizen now, and she wanted to contribute more than just her celebrity status. The Navy approached her to help sell war bonds, using her fame to rally public support. She did so, but she felt her mind was being wasted. She knew, from those long, boring dinners with her former husband, about a critical weakness in the Allied arsenal. Radio-controlled torpedoes were easily jammed by the enemy, sending them off course. Heidi had an idea. What if you could make the radio guidance signal jump rapidly between different frequencies, in a predetermined but random-looking sequence? The enemy wouldn't know which frequency to jam. For a transmitter and receiver to stay in sync as they hopped from frequency to frequency, they would need a shared secret code. It was a brilliant and elegant solution to a complex problem. The concept is now known as frequency hopping spread spectrum, but she needed help to turn the concept into a workable device. At a dinner party, she found an unlikely collaborator, George Antheil, an avant-garde composer and musician known for his wild, experimental music. George Antheil was as unconventional as Hitty's idea. His most famous work was the Ballet Mécanique, a chaotic piece of music composed for 16 synchronized player pianos, sirens, and airplane propellers. Hitty explained her idea for frequency hopping to him, and Antheil immediately saw how to make it work. He realized that the mechanism used to synchronize player pianos, the perforated paper rolls, could be adapted to synchronize the frequency changes in a radio transmitter and receiver. By using two identical paper rolls, one in the torpedo and one in the guidance transmitter, they could create a sequence of frequency hops that was secure and perfectly timed. It was a brilliant fusion of Hollywood glamour and avant-garde music, a solution born in the most unlikely of partnerships. Together, Hitty Lamar and George Antheil worked out the details of their invention. They drafted the plans, and in June of 1941, they applied for a patent. In August of 1942, U.S. Patent Number 292-387 was granted for a secret communication system, with Heidi Kiesler-Markey, her married name at the time, and George Antheil listed as the inventors. Eager to help the war effort, they immediately offered their patent free of charge to the U.S. Navy. They were immensely proud of their creation and believed it could give the Allies a significant technological advantage. They waited for the Navy to embrace their groundbreaking invention. The Navy's response was a crushing disappointment. The military officials were skeptical, to say the least. The idea of putting a mechanism based on a player piano inside a torpedo seemed absurd and overly complicated to them. They filed the patent away, classifying it as too cumbersome to implement. The invention was shelved. Even worse, Hitty was told that if she really wanted to help the war effort, she should stop playing at being an inventor and use her famous face to sell war bonds. And so she did, raising millions of dollars for the cause, all while the patent for her brilliant, potentially war-altering invention gathered dust in a filing cabinet. Her mind, once again, was dismissed in favor of her beauty. The decision to call for a physician isn't one you take lightly. They are expensive, and their methods are intense. For days, you've relied on home remedies, but now, a quiet dread is beginning to set in. After the war, Heidi's film career began to decline. Her contract with MGM ended, and she struggled to find good roles as an independent actress. Her personal life was tumultuous, marked by a series of unhappy marriages and a growing desire for privacy. She became increasingly reclusive, retreating from the public eye that had defined her for so long. She made her final film in 1958 and spent the last decades of her life living in seclusion, first in New York and later in Florida. The world largely forgot about Heidi Lamar, the glamorous movie star, and almost no one knew about Heidi Lamar, the brilliant inventor. Her secret contribution to technology remained buried. The story, however, doesn't end there. In the late 1950s, long after Heidi's patent had expired, engineers at Sylvania rediscovered the concept of frequency hopping. By then, the player piano mechanism could be replaced with modern electronics, making the idea practical. The Navy finally implemented the technology during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 to secure communications aboard their ships. But the invention's true legacy would be far broader. The principle of spread-spectrum technology, which Heidi had co-pioneered, became a fundamental building block of modern digital communications. It's a core component of the technologies we use every single day, including GPS, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. In the 1990s, as the digital age boomed, tech historians and enthusiasts began to trace the origins of these technologies, and they stumbled upon that dusty 1942 patent by a movie star and an avant-garde composer. Heidi Lamar, then in her 80s and living as a recluse, finally began to receive recognition for her incredible foresight. In 1997, she and George Antheil were honored with the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Pioneer Award. When she was told of the award, her reported response was a dry, witty, "Well, it's about time." She passed away in 2000, but the story of her hidden genius was finally coming to light. Heidi Lamar's life was a study in contrasts, public glamour and private intellect, worldly fame and profound misunderstanding. She was a woman who was celebrated for her surface, while her true depth remained hidden from view. Her story is a powerful reminder that genius can be found in the most unexpected places, and that we should never judge a book or a person by their beautiful cover. As you settle deeper into relaxation, think of that curious mind, working away in secret, laying the groundwork for the invisible signals that connect our world today. It's a quiet, powerful legacy, a secret whispered across the decades, finally being heard. For our final story tonight, let's turn our attention to something much smaller, something you might find on your own dinner table. It's an object so common, so ubiquitous, that we rarely give it a second thought. And yet, its journey into our lives was a long, slow, and surprisingly contentious one. We're going to explore the history of the fork. For most of human history, eating was a hands-on affair. People used their fingers, a spoon for liquids, and a knife for cutting and spearing chunks of meat. The idea of a small, specialized tool just for conveying solid food to the mouth was seen as unnecessary, strange, and even sinful for centuries. The fork's rise from a controversial oddity to a standard piece of cutlery is a tale of culture, religion, and changing ideas of civility. The ancestors of the fork existed in ancient Greece and Rome, but they were large, two-pronged implements used for carving and serving meat from a common platter, not for individual dining. The concept of a personal dining fork first gained a foothold in the upper classes of the Byzantine Empire, the sophisticated eastern remnant of the Roman world. By the 7th century, wealthy households in Constantinople were using small, elegant, two-pronged forks as a status symbol. It was a sign of refinement and wealth, a way to eat without soiling one's hands. But this newfangled utensil was viewed with deep suspicion by the rest of Europe. The fork's introduction to Western Europe was famously met with hostility and ridicule. The story goes that in the 11th century, a Byzantine princess named Theodora Anna Dukaina married the Doge of Venice, Domenico Salvo. She shocked the Venetian court by bringing a trousseau that included golden dining forks. She refused to eat with her hands, instead using her strange two-pronged device. The local clergy were scandalized. They saw it as an instrument of excessive and decadent luxury. The influential cleric Peter Damian condemned it as an affront to God, arguing that God had given humans natural forks, their fingers, and that using an artificial substitute was a sign of sinful pride. When the princess died of the plague a few years later, it was widely seen as divine punishment for her hubris. Despite this inauspicious start, the fork slowly caught on among the wealthy merchant class of Italy. During the Renaissance, Italy was the center of fashion and culture, and the fork became another Italian export. However, for centuries, its use remained almost exclusively confined to the Italian peninsula. In the rest of Europe, it was viewed as an absurd, effeminate affectation. A man who used a fork was seen as weak and unmanly. Thomas Coriat, an English traveler who visited Italy in the early 17th century, adopted the habit and was mercilessly mocked for it upon his return to England, earning the nickname furcifer, a Latin pun meaning both fork-bearer and rascal. The fork's fortunes began to change when it was championed by another influential woman, Catherine de' Medici. When she married the future King Henry II of France in 1533, she brought with her a team of Florentine chefs and a collection of elegant dining forks. While it didn't immediately catch on with the general populace, it became a fashionable item at the French royal court. The French, ever the arbiters of style, slowly began to embrace the fork as a symbol of sophisticated dining etiquette. They also added a third, and later a fourth, tine, or prong, and curved them slightly, making the fork more practical for scooping up food like peas, a task for which the two-pronged Italian model was ill-suited. Even with its adoption in France and Italy, the fork faced stiff resistance elsewhere, particularly in England and America. The Puritans saw it, along with other continental fashions, as a symbol of vanity and moral decay. For hundreds of years, the proper way to eat in polite English society was with a knife, a spoon, and your hands. You would use the knife to cut a piece of meat and then use either the tip of the knife or your fingers to lift it to your mouth. This is why traditional table settings placed the fork on the left, as it was initially just used to hold the meat steady while the right hand did the cutting. It was only in the late 18th and early 19th centuries that the fork finally conquered the English-speaking world. Eventually, a family member is sent to fetch him. You wait, listening to the clatter of horse-drawn carts on the cobblestones outside, each sound making you wonder if it's the good doctor, finally arriving to pronounce your fate. The Industrial Revolution played a key role in the fork's final triumph. Mass production techniques made cutlery, including silver-plated forks, much more affordable for the burgeoning middle class. As notions of hygiene and gentility grew, the idea of eating with one's hands became seen as increasingly uncivilized. The fork, once a symbol of sinful pride, was now a marker of respectability and good manners. By the Victorian era, the fork was firmly established on every dinner table, and specialized forks for fish, salad, oysters, and desserts proliferated, a sign of its complete integration into the rituals of dining. And so, that simple object, lying quietly beside your plate, carries within it a deep and winding history. It is a story of how an object can travel from being a symbol of imperial luxury, to an instrument of perceived sin, to an effeminate joke, and finally, to an indispensable tool of everyday life. It reflects our changing ideas about religion, class, gender, and what it means to be civilized. As you finally let go and drift towards sleep, perhaps you can spare a final, gentle thought for all the quiet histories that surround us, hidden in the most ordinary of objects, waiting to be discovered. Rest well. Let us return for a moment to the curious tale of the Great Emu War, and consider the perspective of the soldiers themselves. Major Meredith and his 2 men were professional soldiers, trained for conventional warfare against human opponents. The absurdity of their new assignment must have been palpable. Imagine arriving in the dusty, windswept outback, your state-of-the-art Lewis guns polished and ready, only to be told your enemy is a large, flightless bird. The initial confidence they must have felt would have quickly evaporated after that first, failed engagement. The frustration of firing burst after burst at the scattering, bobbing targets, only to see them disappear into the scrubland, must have been immense. It was a war with no front line, no clear objective, and an enemy that refused to fight fair. Let's reconsider the tactics of the emus, not as a joke, but as a surprisingly effective defense strategy. Their tendency to split into small, leader-led groups when threatened is a classic example of decentralized command. It made them an impossible target for a weapon like a machine gun, which is designed to be effective against massed formations. Each small emu unit made its own decision to flee, creating a chaotic, unpredictable retreat that the gunners couldn't track. They used the terrain to their advantage, their long legs carrying them over the rough ground at speeds of up to 30 miles per hour. In a very real sense, the emus were masters of asymmetrical warfare, unwittingly employing tactics that guerrilla fighters would use to confound conventional armies for decades to come. The aftermath of the war for the farmers of the Campion district was one of grim continuation. The brief, farcical military intervention had provided a moment of hope, and then a moment of dark comedy. But it hadn't solved their problem. They returned to their fields to find the emus still feasting, the fences still broken. The introduction of the bounty system, however, changed the dynamic. It empowered the farmers to become the primary combatants. This was a war of attrition, fought not with machine guns in set-piece battles, but with rifles and shotguns. Day after day, it was a slow, grim process that eventually reduced the emu numbers, but it highlights the failure of the initial, heavy-handed military approach. Sometimes, a decentralized problem requires a decentralized solution. Let's now descend once more into the tunnels of the London Underground and think about the navvies, the laborers who built it. These were incredibly tough men, often Irish immigrants, who did the backbreaking work of excavation. In the cut-and-cover era, they worked in open trenches, exposed to the elements, wielding little more than picks and shovels. When the deep-level tubes were being built, their work became even more dangerous. They worked in cramped, claustrophobic conditions within the Great Head Shield, under immense air pressure to keep the tunnels from collapsing or flooding. The bends, a painful and sometimes fatal condition caused by rapid decompression, was a constant risk. They were the unsung, unseen heroes of the underground, their sweat and toil sealed into the very walls of the tunnels. Consider the psychological impact of the first underground journeys in 1863. For a Victorian society deeply rooted in the natural world and often suspicious of new technology, traveling underground was a profound experience. It was a journey into an artificial underworld, a realm of smoke, steam, and flickering gaslight. Commentators of the time wrote of the disorienting feeling of being plunged into darkness, the deafening roar of the train in the enclosed space, and the strange, fleeting glimpses of stations rushing past. It was both thrilling and terrifying, a descent into a man-made Hades. It represented a new kind of human mastery over the environment, a willingness to burrow into the earth itself in the name of progress and speed. Frank Pick's vision for the underground's design was truly revolutionary because it was holistic. He understood that a passenger's journey began before they even stepped on a train. It began with the poster they saw on the street, the look of the station entrance, the clarity of the signage, and the feel of the ticket in their hand. By controlling every aesthetic element, he created a seamless and reassuring brand experience. This was particularly important for a system that could be intimidating to new users. The clean lines of the Johnston font and the simple geometry of the roundel logo created a sense of order and calm amidst the chaos of the city, making the dark, subterranean world of the tube feel safe, modern, and accessible. The tube map, designed by Harry Beck, is a masterpiece because it understands how our minds work. We don't need to know the precise geographical curve of a railway line to navigate it. We just need to know the sequence of stations and where to change trains. Beck's map stripped away all the unnecessary information, presenting the network in its purest, most logical form. It is a triumph of function over form, where the form itself becomes beautiful in its clarity. Its enduring success shows that a good design is not just about making something look good, but about making it understandable. It transformed a complex, sprawling system into something that could be grasped at a glance, empowering millions of people to navigate the city with confidence. Let's return to Heidi Lamar and the gilded cage of her marriage to Fritz Mandel. The irony of her situation was profound. Her husband, a man who dealt in the tools of destruction, saw her as a beautiful, brainless object. He failed to see that the very environment he created, the endless dinners with military engineers, was her university. He was so blinded by her beauty and his own sense of superiority that he inadvertently gave her a world-class education in state-of-the-art military technology. It is a powerful example of how underestimation can be a source of hidden strength. While they saw a doll, she was becoming a scientist. quietly gathering the knowledge that would form the basis of her own secret weapon. When he finally enters, he brings with him the smells of the city, a whiff of wood smoke, damp wool, and the faint, metallic scent of his trade. His bag, full of polished wood and gleaming metal, is set down with a heavy thud. The partnership between Heidi Lamar and George Antheil is one of the most wonderfully improbable collaborations in the history of invention. On the surface, they had nothing in common: a glamorous Hollywood actress and a bad boy of classical music. But beneath the surface, they were both creative outsiders who thought differently from the people around them. Antheil's experience with synchronizing player pianos was the key that unlocked the practical application of Heidi's brilliant concept. Their invention was a testament to the power of interdisciplinary thinking, the idea that a breakthrough in one field can come from an unexpected connection to another. It was a spark that flew between the worlds of art and science, celluloid and sheet music. The U.S. Navy's rejection of Lamar and Antheil's patent is a classic tale of institutional inertia and prejudice. The military establishment of the 1940s was a deeply conservative, male-dominated world. The idea that a Hollywood actress and an avant-garde composer could have produced a valuable military invention was simply too far-fetched for them to accept. Their dismissal of the idea as too cumbersome was likely a polite excuse to shelve something they didn't understand and came from sources they didn't respect. It's a sad but common story, a revolutionary idea being dismissed by the establishment not because it's flawed, but because it's unfamiliar and comes from an unexpected place. The final vindication of Heidi Lamar's work is a bittersweet epilogue. While she lived long enough to see her invention acknowledged, the recognition came at the end of a long, often difficult life, decades after her contribution could have been most celebrated. The fact that the invisible technology powering our modern connected world, the Wi-Fi that links our devices, the GPS that guides our way, has its roots in the mind of a 1940s movie star is a beautiful and poetic twist of history. It's a legacy that is far more enduring than any of her films, a testament to the hidden, brilliant mind that the world was too busy looking at to ever truly see. Let us stir the pot of history one last time and return to the humble fork. The religious opposition to it is fascinating. The idea that using a tool to eat was an act of pride against God seems strange to us now, but it speaks to a worldview where the body and its natural functions were seen as divinely ordained. To interfere with the simple act of eating with God-given hands was to put on airs, to act as if you were better than the humble state in which humanity was created. The fork was a tiny, sharp symbol of human artifice trying to improve upon divine design, and for a time, that was seen as a dangerous and blasphemous proposition. The association of the fork with femininity is another interesting cultural thread. For centuries, the knife was the primary eating utensil for men. It was a tool, a weapon, an extension of masculine strength and self-sufficiency. The fork, by contrast, was small, delicate, and associated with the refined, unnecessary manners of the Italian and French courts. For a rugged English or German man to use a fork was to adopt a foreign, unmanly custom. It took a long time for the fork to shed this reputation and become a neutral object, a process that mirrored broader shifts in cultural ideas about masculinity and etiquette. Let's think about the practical evolution of the fork's design. The original two-pronged model was essentially a miniature spear, good for stabbing a piece of meat but not much else. The addition of the third and fourth tines and the gentle curve of the prongs transformed the fork into a much more versatile tool. It could now be used for scooping as well as stabbing, making it suitable for a wider variety of foods. This evolution shows a classic design principle at work. Form follows function. As dining habits changed and cuisine became more complex, the tool adapted to meet the new demands placed upon it, becoming the efficient and multi-purpose utensil we know today. The rise of the fork is, in essence, the story of the rise of a new kind of personal space at the dinner table. Before the fork, dining was a more communal affair, with people often eating from shared plates and bowls. The adoption of a full set of personal cutlery, knife, spoon, and fork for every individual helped to create a personal bubble around each diner. It was part of a broader cultural shift towards individualism and a heightened sense of bodily privacy and hygiene. That small metal object is a quiet symbol of a major change in how we relate to each other and to the food we share. The Great Emu War has also entered the realm of folklore and popular culture, becoming a symbol for any futile or comically mismatched struggle. It's a story that resonates because it's so relatable. We've all faced problems that seemed simple on the surface but turned out to be incredibly complex and resistant to our best efforts. The image of trained soldiers with machine guns being outmaneuvered by birds is a perfect metaphor for the universe's sense of humor. It reminds us to approach our challenges with a degree of humility, because you never know when you might find yourself in your own personal emu war, completely outmatched by a problem you underestimated. The role of the media in the Emu War was crucial to its legacy. The presence of the Fox movie-tone cinematographer turned a local pest control issue into a national story. The failure wasn't just a military one. It was a public one, captured for all to see. The newspaper reports, filled with witty headlines and mocking commentary, cemented the conflict's place in the public imagination as a farce. It demonstrates the power of the press to shape a narrative, transforming a frustrating agricultural problem into a legendary and amusing tale of military incompetence. Without the media's attention, the story might have faded into an obscure government report. Thinking back on the London Underground, let's explore the naming of the lines. The names themselves are a wonderful tapestry of London's history and geography. The Bakerloo line is a portmanteau of Baker Street and Waterloo, its two original terminals. The Central line runs through the center of the city. The Piccadilly line serves Piccadilly Circus. The Victoria line is named for Victoria Station. Each name is a clue, a connection to the city above. They turn the abstract diagram of the map into a real-world geography, weaving the subterranean network into the fabric of the city's identity, with each name telling a small story of its own. He'll begin his examination. There's no stethoscope, that won't be invented for another half-century. Instead, he presses an ear to your chest, asks you to stick out your tongue, and peers intently at the color of your skin. The ghost stations of the London Underground are another fascinating aspect of its history. There are dozens of stations that were closed over the years due to low passenger numbers or rerouting of lines. Stations like Aldwych, Down Street, and Brompton Road still exist in the dark, silent and abandoned between the working stations. Trains rush past their decaying platforms and peeling poster ads from a bygone era. They are time capsules, poignant reminders of a London that no longer exists. During the war, some, like Down Street, were secretly converted into secure bunkers for government use, adding another layer of intrigue to their quiet, subterranean existence. Let's consider Heidi Lamar's later life as a recluse. After a lifetime of being stared at, of her face being her primary commodity, it's perhaps understandable that she chose to withdraw from the world. Her seclusion could be seen as a final act of rebellion, a way to reclaim her identity from the public that had so thoroughly misunderstood her. In the privacy of her own home, she was no longer Hedy Lamarr, the beautiful movie star. She could simply be Hetty Kiesler, the curious woman with the inventive mind. Her retreat from the world was perhaps the only way she could finally stop being an object and just be a person. The eventual recognition for her invention highlights the slow, often meandering path of historical justice. For over 50 years, her contribution was a footnote, known only to a handful of patent experts and tech enthusiasts. It took the rise of the internet and the democratization of information for her story to be pieced together and shared widely. It's a hopeful thought that even when history gets it wrong, when contributions are overlooked or dismissed, the record can eventually be corrected. The truth can lie dormant for decades, like a seed, waiting for the right conditions to finally come to light and be acknowledged. Reflecting on the fork once more, its journey into the American colonies is a story of cultural inheritance and divergence. The early English settlers brought with them a suspicion of the fork, but as the colonies grew and a wealthy merchant class emerged in cities like Boston and Philadelphia, they began to import European fashions and ideas of gentility. The fork became a way to signal one's sophistication and connection to the civilized old world. Its adoption in America mirrored its journey in England, a slow transition from a strange foreign object to an essential marker of middle-class respectability. The sheer variety of forks that emerged in the Victorian era is a testament to the period's obsession with rules and categorization. There was a specific fork for almost every conceivable food. Oyster forks, fish forks, salad forks, dessert forks, pastry forks, pickle forks. It was a dizzying array of etiquette that was designed to separate those who knew from those who didn't. This fork anxiety was a very real social pressure. Using the wrong fork at a dinner party was a mortifying faux pas. It shows how a simple tool could be weaponized as a gatekeeper of social class, a tiny silver test of one's breeding and sophistication. Let's think again about the sheer scale of the emu problem in 1932. 20,000 emus is a staggering number. Imagine the sight, a vast, moving sea of feathered bodies descending on your livelihood. It wasn't just the eating of the wheat. It was the sheer physical destruction. Emus are big, powerful birds. The damage they caused to fences was a major issue, as it allowed other pests, like the famously destructive Australian rabbit population, to pour in. The problem was a cascade of ecological and agricultural disasters, and the emus were just the most visible and imposing part of it. It's easier to understand the farmers' desperation when you picture the true scale of the invasion they were facing. The choice of the Lewis gun for the Emu War is interesting from a military history perspective. The Lewis gun was a light machine gun, famous for its use in the trenches of World War I. It was designed to be portable and was often used on aircraft. It was a reliable and effective weapon against human soldiers, but its characteristics, a high rate of fire designed for suppression, were ill-suited for what was essentially a hunting task. A few skilled marksmen with accurate rifles would have likely been far more effective and cost-efficient. The choice to use machine guns was a theatrical one, a case of using overwhelming, but inappropriate, force for a problem that required precision. The story of the London Underground during the Blitz is not just one of shelter, but also of continuity. While thousands sheltered on the platforms, the trains often kept running on adjacent tracks, a surreal scene of domesticity and transit side by side. The staff of the Underground, drivers, station masters, maintenance workers, became frontline heroes. They worked tirelessly to keep the city moving, repairing bomb damage overnight, and managing the dual role of their stations as transport hubs and safe havens. Their dedication was a crucial part of London's ability to carry on, a testament to the resilience of ordinary people and essential infrastructure in a time of crisis. The art of the London Underground is a gallery for the people. From its earliest days, the UERL commissioned beautiful and striking posters to advertise travel to London's suburbs and attractions. Artists like Man Ray, Edward McKnight Coffer, and Paul Nash were hired to create these works. It was a pioneering example of corporate arts patronage. These posters weren't just ads. They were works of art that brightened the gloomy platforms and brought modern design to the masses. They sold not just a destination, but a lifestyle, an aspirational vision of leisure and beauty made accessible by the tube. This tradition continues today, making the Underground a vibrant and ever-changing public art space. Hedy Lamarr's desire to invent was, at its core, a desire to solve problems. Her mind was naturally drawn to identifying inefficiencies and imagining better solutions, whether it was a fizzy drink or a secure torpedo guidance system. This problem-solving instinct is the essence of the engineering mindset. It's a way of looking at the world not just as it is, but as it could be. Her tragedy and her triumph is that she had this engineer's mind trapped inside the body of a goddess, and the world was too distracted by the vessel to ever recognize the value of its contents until it was almost too late.